All right, hello everybody. Um, I'm Cricket J, and Flowtrace is going to be with us in just a minute. So, what our plan for today is we're thinking about doing a debate stream, which we haven't really done with one-on-one with each other before. And Flowtrace and I tend to agree on a lot of stuff. We get along pretty well, and I thought this, but once in a while we do find stuff that we disagree about, and I thought, rather than just constantly talk most of the time about the stuff that we do agree on, I thought we'd take today to maybe talk about some of the stuff that we don't agree on. Flowtrace DM'd me a minute ago. He says that he's on his way, and so I'm just gonna chill here for a minute and wait for him to show up. Headless Chicken says, "Good luck. I'm listening and judging." Okay, as you should be. Judge us, please. Most of the time for the last several months, we've been doing kind of this content review type of stuff. We've been doing a lot of video essays, things like that, and just kind of reacting and responding, and we've been listening and judging to other people. So it's time you guys get to listen and judge to us. We're going to be bringing some of our kind of hot take opinions. We've each got a list that we're going to talk about today. We don't know how many we're going to get through in the list because we don't know how long it's going to take to get through them. We don't, we don't know each other's lists. We don't know how much agreement or disagreement it's going to be, but we're kind of expecting that we brought some kind of spicy opinions that we can probably disagree about. Headless. I hope it will be fun. I think it will. Flowtrace sent me a DM. I'm going to cover up my screen for a second so that I'm not showing my DM, but I'm still here. Okay, he's going to be slightly late. He's getting his camera working, and for anybody who doesn't know the Flowtrace, he usually appears on screen as the Fortnite llama. So this is how I spend my Wednesdays, is debating politics and philosophy with a cartoon llama, and it's good fun. He's a good conversation partner. So. The llama dude, I've seen them. Yeah, you probably have. Flowtrace is around Twitchpol a lot. He does a lot of panels. If you watch a lot of Twitchpol content, like if you watch Wick panels or Prime panels or whatever, then it's very likely you have seen him. I used to do a lot of that kind of stuff last year, and that's how he and I met initially, as we would do panels together. And he was one of my favorite people to talk to, so I invited him to do a show with me, and we've just been doing it ever since then. But I kind of got burned out on panels, haven't done very many of them lately. I just did one this last week, and before that I hadn't done one for a few months. But yeah, so mostly I'm just doing this show and then occasionally popping up on other people's streams. I pop up on King Solomon's stream sometimes. I pop up on I don't know. I'll pop into Katie's chat and go bug her with whatever annoying thought is on my mind that day. But Headless, you might end up yelling at us via text. That is totally fine. You are welcome to yell at us. We're gonna be. Let's see. Headless says, "If you've ever seen me in Katie's chat, you know what to expect." Kind of, yeah. But Headless, also, I've talked to you on King Solomon's stream, right? We've been in VC together, so I do know you a little bit. And yeah, you're welcome to criticize us. I mean, we're going to be bringing some relatively spicy opinions today, I think, and so you're gonna have plenty to yell at, I think. Oh shit! I told you I'm terrible with names. Okay, well, you know what though? Like, you've probably just actually never seen my face or paid attention to my name before. I'm like 100% certain I talked to you. let's see, lots of pot with an already famously bad memory. Well, Headless, you might remember sometime last year when Not So Erudite used to do her like debate competition. You were going to debate me about whether to abolish libraries, and we never got to do it yeah, that's right, Steelman Sunday. We never got to do it. But I had this whole like elaborate like conspiracy theory that I was going to present to you about why we should not abolish libraries, and my idea was that the Earth used to be ruled over by ancient aliens, but the reason that we no longer are ruled over by aliens is because we started building libraries. That's why the aliens went away, and if we get rid of libraries, the aliens will come back, and then. I was going to go into a whole conspiracy theory about that. Headless going to go full Southern Baptist preacher. Yeah. I remember you telling me that, and you got the accent for it. Man, that would have been so fun. Yeah, I think it would. I mean, we could still do it just one of these days, like separately. Like if I just happen to run into you on Solemn Stream, we can just like do comedic banter about libraries or whatever. We do run into each other every now and then, so it'll be all good. Let's see. Be down for sure. Yeah, that would be great. I haven't seen Solomon streaming that much lately. I mean, I'm not sure if I just haven't caught it, the announcements or what, but I haven't seen him around in probably like a week or two. I hope he's just doing good, but. He usually only streams once or twice a week. He did both weekends. Okay. Yeah, I remember like he used to do, I think, like Friday, Saturday nights pretty commonly. For anybody who doesn't know, Solomon is my friend who lives in Japan. And so because he's in a completely different time zone, he's like 7 hours away. I'm on Pacific time. I live in California, and Japan is 7 hours ahead of where I'm at. And so it's like very inconvenient if I want to talk to a friend who lives in Japan pretty regularly. But anyway, hi Flowtrace. Uh-oh, can't hear you.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, I heard something there.
Hello? Yep, is this working?
Oh, yeah. You're
okay.
Good now.
Yeah, okay. Just give me 1 second here.
Yeah, no problem. You should DM him. Yeah, you know what? You're right. I actually should DM him. Yeah, I'm used to not having to DM him because I just wander in his stream occasionally anyway and just say what's up. But given that I haven't actually talked to him in a week or two, I probably actually should go DM Solomon and see what he's been up to. If you can't get the camera set up, it's not that big a deal, Oh, okay. Hello.
Uh-oh, hold on, it's frozen.
Headless says, "I love Solomon, even though you're really."
It's all gone to hell.
Oh, okay. Well, this is the first time I've seen you not be a llama. You're...
Yeah. Well, I was just working. I was just in another Discord with someone who knows with a couple of people who know what they're doing. I'm just gonna try to. Okay, I'm just gonna restart OBS.
Okay.
That's gonna fix it for sure. Actually, I need to restart my Discord too. 1 quick second.
Okay, no problem. Headless, it's funny, like whenever I talk to Solomon, he seems to be like such a nice person that's easy to get along with, and yet like I've heard like 4 different people say like that he's super frustrating and pisses them off all the time. I think it's like pretty funny how often he seems to get that reaction. Welcome back.
Thank you. Oh my god, why?
Headless says, "I'm pretty sure it's his weird use of language." No worries, I'm not. I don't feel like Solomon's use of language is that weird. I think he has like a slightly weird conversational style, but I don't really think his use of language is that weird. I think he does have a tendency to approach some kind of difficult conversations in a way that I think a lot of people find frustrating because he's not trying to like make progress in a conversation in the same way that a lot of people are. He oh yay!
Okay, there we go. It's working.
Okay,
Amazing.
good to see you.
Okay,
all right.
now I'm really gonna try and do something. I'm gonna try to go live. Let's see here.
Oh, okay. Are you streaming on your own channel too?
I should be now.
Oh, okay, nice. Well, congratulations. That's been a long time coming. I'm glad you finally got that going.
I know, it's huge. Oh my gosh, it's going live, I think.
Nice.
There we go. Okay. All right, beautiful.
Nice. Well, you know what? When we're done today, I should like raid you and send however many people I've got over your way.
Okay, right on. Woo. Okay. I don't think. Oh, what is this alert? Oh my god. Okay, I don't know. Okay. Woo. We are good to go. I'm so excited. I'm so ready.
Okay. Nice. So I was explaining earlier what our plan is for today. We're kind of bringing some hot take opinions to each other where we expect to find some disagreement, and then we're gonna try to talk them out as best we can. And we have no idea how this is gonna go or how long it's gonna take or anything. Do you have anything you want to add on that before we get started?
No, I think that's pretty accurate.
All right. Do you have any preference about who goes first?
No, I don't think so. I'm pretty much good to go.
Okay, so I also have no preference, but I was ready for this, right? So I've got a virtual coin flip, right? So I'm gonna ask you to call head. So like heads, I'll go first. Tails, you go first. Is that okay?
Yeah. Let's.
All right.
Go for it.
All right. I wish I could show it on screen. I probably just okay. Tails though. I got so. So that would mean. Oh, I just got a notification. The notification says Flowtrace is finally streaming. I feel like Twitch is
I set that.
Oh, you set that? Okay, I was rambling.
I got all the bells and whistles.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, so by the way, this is Flowtrace, who you might not recognize because you've only seen him as a llama before, but you probably know his voice.
I'm gonna get a shirt. Don't worry.
He appears on all kinds of panels. He's on Wick panels. He's on Prime panels. If you watch a lot of Twitch Poll, you've very likely seen him around. So please do give him a follow whenever you can. All right, so I'm ready. What's the first spicy take that you got?
Okay. My first take, I believe I mentioned this in passing. I don't know if it was last show or a couple shows ago, and you said, I think I disagree with that. I think that everyone is actually secretly a utilitarian with extra steps, or almost everyone. When I talk to people and they say, I'm a virtue ethicist, and I'm like, why? Well, I think it helps the most people in the most situations. It's like, okay, that just kind of sounds like utilitarianism. I think like the core logic of and I guess to be fair, this is more of the layman's understanding of what utilitarianism is, but the core logic of, we probably ought prioritize for the most people and consider their needs over others is like a shared framework among like 99% of people. I think it's only when you get into very specific scenarios like, would you kill one to save 10? No. Well, why? Well, I think that why often itself operates within the framework of utilitarianism. So they'll say something like, I wouldn't kill one to save 10 because if you endorse that kind of logic, it leads to more bad outcomes. Or I think that by causing that harm, you're actually doing something worse than saving 10 people. But I still think it always comes down to a framework of what is the most good for the most amount of people.
Okay. So off the top of my head, I agree that almost everyone, at least like adults, care about the consequences of their actions and they make moral decisions informed by the expected consequences, right? So I have no objection to this. I expect you'll probably also agree with me that like young children who are just like learning morality really aren't doing this, and they're just kind of following whatever rules they're told to. They're effectively deontologists, right? Like in that sense. Do we agree on that stuff so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So then once you reach adulthood and you're more or less thinking for yourself about moral decisions, at least to the extent that any of us do, then I do think people pretty much all take into account consequences of, expected consequences of their actions, and generally choose the whatever they think is they expect to have the best consequences.
Yeah.
However, my outlook on this is that it's a behavioral heuristic and not a philosophical account of human morality.
Hmm. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that characterization, but I think that if that is the case, then that's all we can point to when we say people are certain philosophical positions. I don't know if you can. It totally could be the case that people aren't. It could totally be the case that people are getting to utilitarianism in the sense of like being morally lucky. But I think that that is like just as. But I think that if you're going to go down that road, I think the same is going to be true. I don't think that's going to be uniquely true of utilitarianism. So I don't think you can like discount the idea that people are utilitarian just because they do it in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think people generally behave in approximately as a utilitarian would behave, is basically what I mean when I say it's a behavioral heuristic, and that people do think through their process, and they do care about having the most happiness for the most people. Like most people will generally endorse the idea that that's good. It's just when you say that you think everybody's a utilitarian, I guess what I thought you meant by that when I heard you say it before, I thought you were saying that everybody believes that at the ground level of human morality that's what it all comes down to, and that's the kind of like ultimate ground level justification. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the problem. Sorry, my OBS is just having a little bit of trouble involving this conversation.
Oh.
I think the way I would square that circle is that I think those what if you're going to make that kind of appeal to those basal justifications, I don't think those exist in any sort of philosophical context. It almost feels like more of like a biological reality. So I think insofar as we can call anyone any philosophical position, we could call them utilitarian.
Don't kind of all of our beliefs exist in a biological reality?
I mean, yeah, but like, yes, but we still can like, yes, but there's still utility to having like words to describe those differences.
Yeah. So, like, is there a particular thing about utilitarianism that where you would say it's like less of a biological thing, or no?
I don't think it's less of a biological thing. I just think insofar as we are classifying as any philosophical position, they can be correctly classified as utilitarians
Oh,
most of
you just
the
mean like
vast majority of the time.
like compared to deontology or virtue ethics, that maybe it's the one that people use more than the other two. Is that all you mean by it?
No, not quite. I'm trying to figure out how exactly to describe this. What I'm trying to say is that I think that a lot of people say that that they are something other than utilitarians, and that they are saying that, but they still that they are utilitarians on a deeper level, and the reasons for which they arrive to their conclusions are like a utilitarian framework. Within the context that everything is in of itself like from a biological reality.
Um, I'm trying to think. Like, I think you've got it approximately mostly right. I don't have like a huge objection to what you said just now. It's just sort of okay. I guess like perhaps I might have misunderstood a little bit of what you meant the first time you said it, because I thought part of it is that I thought you might have meant that almost everybody buys into the philosophical justification for utilitarianism, that we should just make all our moral decisions by considering that whichever consequence will bring the most happiness to the most people. And I think it's not necessarily true that people buy into that philosophically, even if they do act that way approximately. And then the other
Oh,
thing
I
is,
see. Hmm.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Yeah, keep going. I'm just thinking about that.
Okay. And then the other thing is that somebody who says that that they believe in like deontology or virtue ethics, I think they legitimately are following a process that isn't just thinking about the consequences of their actions. So like For example, like I'll just take a virtue ethics one because this is one that I've had a bunch of conversations about. I have a friend who's like really into virtue ethics, and what he'll basically say is like, um, that you could take all of what's in utilitarianism or consequentialism or however you want to call it, and you could like cash it out in terms of virtue ethics just as much as you could do the other way around. But because like whatever actions you have affect your character, and then your character goes on to influence your future moral decisions, and therefore like cultivating the right character is actually the more important way to look at your moral decisions rather than just considering the consequences each time separately as if they were just entirely like.
But I feel like what you're saying is still, I feel like that line of argumentation is still fundamentally utilitarian. You're saying, oh, because the real criticism here is not that the only thing you care about are consequences, but that you are missing consequences. That there are consequences you're not taking into account, i.e., the consequence of having a good character. And I think like that's the core of what I'm trying to get at here. Is it feels like there's like a fundamental currency that like all these like there aren't it doesn't feel like there's any system that is being significantly supported by people that is operating from a different framework where you're saying no, this system does have worse consequences, but we should do it. It's always a utilitarian calculus. It feels like, at least from like the layman understanding of utilitarianism.
I think in almost all cases these things are going to line up. That he would say like we picked the action that has the best consequences, but just with a different justification. I think you're right to say that like the effect it has on your character is a consequence, and so there's like some amount of consequentialism built into the argument. That doesn't necessarily mean that consequential appeal is the ground level of what he thinks constitutes good or bad. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean like I'm trying to like steelman his position because honestly, like I'm more utilitarian than I am virtue ethics. Like although I'm somewhat sympathetic to both, just I think they're both like honestly pretty adequate heuristics for moral decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you and I have been doing these videos on like moral philosophy recently, and I think I've said a couple of times that I don't really buy into any of these as an accurate philosophical account of human morality. But I think like at least virtue ethics and consequentialism are like pretty good decision making frameworks that you should think about the consequences of your actions. You should also like consider cultivating a good character and then acting on a good character and that kind of thing. And then there was another thing I was going to say, and I totally forgot. Have you got anything to?
No, I think like. I think the core trouble is that I think the core of where the disagreement is coming from, and sort of why we've almost in a way already resolved it, is because the word utilitarian means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and when you're trying to appeal to like the layman understanding of utilitarianism, there's this very vague amorphous idea of that is probably a lot more ubiquitous than like what I imagine. I'm assuming because I don't read, but what I imagine like in philosophy, like utilitarianism is much more rigidly defined in certain ways. It's much more prescriptive. My assumption would be that if you went to a very high level philosophy class, not even very high level, a professional philosophy class in college, they would not say utilitarianism is like consequences matter and you should optimize for the best consequences, because that kind of just begs the question.
Yeah, because like that can't like that can be a decision making process. It can't be a definition of what's good or bad because it contains within it a reference to which consequences are good, and you have to have some other metric by which to determine those. Okay, here's another possible counter argument. There's probably more religious people than non-religious people, right? And I think when religious people do their moral decision making, although they might consider the consequences of their actions, I think they're going to have a very different philosophical outlook on what that means and how to do it compared to what you and I would have who don't consider ourselves religious.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I don't know if I agree. Can you give an example?
Yeah. So for like a person who's like Muslim and believes that you should like pray facing Mecca 5 times a day or whatever practice they have, they don't necessarily believe that each time they do that, it's going to produce better consequences. Like presumably they don't believe they're going to suddenly go to hell just because they missed a prayer, and they may or may not believe that their time is going to be enjoyed more when they do the prayer, or that they're going to have better peace of mind or something like that. Like they might believe that, but they might also believe, I'm doing this because it is my duty to my religion. I must do it because God commands it, and not necessarily because it has better consequences.
I think there's probably a very limited amount of people that do that, or I don't know. There's definitely some, but I feel like all these religious people are going to almost like tautologically say like, well, God is telling me to do this because it's the right thing to do, right? Like if God's telling me to do it, it's not because it's going to be bad. It's going to be because it's for good. I think what a lot of them might say, which is something that drives me a little crazy, is like, well, it's not for us to know why it's good. Like we can't know that. That's God's realm.
I think that's kind of a Giga Chad answer, honestly.
I mean, it is and it isn't. It's like it's definitely a lot more Giga Chad, I think, than the typical answer. But I think that just no, you're right. It actually is Giga Chad because it just cuts to the chase of being like, okay, you kind of just have to take their word on this. But then I would say but by cutting to the chase, I think it exposes the fundamental flaw, which is like, okay, but you aren't aware of whether or not he is a supernatural entity. You only have the evidence, presented to you by, other humans, which are fallible and can lie and stuff. Unless you're then going to just make the presuppositionalist, I had a moment where God came to me and now I'm a true believer.
Right, which a lot of religious people will say that they have some kind of like personal connection to God or something. And,
Yeah.
Even people who wouldn't go around calling themselves presuppositionalists will nevertheless claim that their religious morals are rooted in their personal experiences.
Yeah.
And I think when those people are making moral decisions, they will often do it either because they believe their religion has commanded them to do something, or because they've essentially accepted some cultural norms that are around their religion, and then they just behave according to those cultural norms.
Yeah. And I think that then just gets back into the question of like, well, are you doing this because you have this philosophical bedwork from which you evolve your positions, or is this philosophical bedwork sort of reverse engineered to justify the things you already do? Which I think is I think it's like a healthy portion of both.
Yeah. And I don't at all mean to suggest that religious people can't like consider the consequences of their actions when they're making moral decisions. Of course they can.
Yeah.
And of course,
yeah. Get out of here, religious cells.
Yeah. So, do you know about the Euthyphro dilemma? Have we talked about that before?
I don't think so. No.
The Euthyphro dilemma is this thing that was it originally comes from a dialogue that was I think written by Plato, but it's a conversation in which Socrates is a character and he's talking to some other ancient Athenian dude, and so Socrates is questioning this guy on his religious morals. And so the way that the question comes up is like Socrates wants the guy to say, like, do the gods command you to do this because it is good, or is it good because the gods command you to do it, right? And it seemed like
I am familiar with this. I don't think we've talked about it though.
Okay, it seemed like that's really close to what you were getting at when you were saying a minute ago. You think almost all religious people would say that God commands you to do something because it is good, but I'm not actually so sure that's true. I think a lot of religious people would say God decides what is good, rather than
I think it's what I meant to say there is I think those people are. Oh my! Why does I keep doing this? Okay. What I meant to say was I think that the people would say that what they're doing is good, and they like to follow God because God tells them good things. That might be because it's good because God tells them, or God is only going to tell them to do things that are good. But fundamentally, I still think that they're going to make an appeal that by following religion, they are having good outcomes. Whether or not those outcomes are determined by God tautologically or God is just the knower of truths, I think is a separate issue.
I think they do expect good outcomes to align with the decisions that are expected of them from their religion, but I think if you talk to a lot of these religious people about their morals, and you say, like, if God commanded you to do something that had bad outcomes, would you still do it? And I think it's very common that they'll say yes.
Yeah, I think I think both answers are actually pretty common. I think like there's the response, well, if God would never do that because God wouldn't tell you to do a bad thing,
Yeah,
or well,
that's
if
true.
God's telling you to do it, it is good. But I, I think there's probably a very healthy amount of both. I have no idea what the actual breakdown would be. It also probably I imagine change a lot based on the actual religion and denomination.
Yeah, I would expect that's true. And then as far as the Euthyphro dilemma, like, it's kind of like offering up here's two bullets that you can bite. But I should point out that religious people don't always accept that this is a true dichotomy. They will sometimes say like,
Yeah.
no, neither of these is an accurate description of what I believe. It's not that it's good because God says so, and it's not that God says so because it's good. Instead, it's something else, and then they'll say like maybe good is intrinsically part of God's nature. It's inseparable. That His commands are just inevitably good, but it's not because of one or the other. I don't know. I mean, they'll say stuff like that sometimes. But when they're going through that thought process, I think that's not really like utilitarian calculus that they're doing, right? Does that make sense?
What thought process specifically isn't utilitarian?
Like when if they believe that okay, that it's not that God commands you to do things because they're good, but that God is either deciding what is good or that it's intrinsically part of His nature to just like be like He's one and the same with goodness or whatever it is that they believe. And then it's like it is our duty as humans, not even necessarily to have to understand this stuff. We're just supposed to like act according to our best understanding of good according to our religion, regardless of what we expect the consequences to be.
Oh, okay, I see. I would agree in that aspect. They're not practicing utilitarian thought, but I think once you get more downstream from what, because you can apply utilitarianism in the sense of what goodness is, as like a normative ethics question or a meta ethics question. I think I'm using those words correctly, but
Yeah.
but I still think fundamentally, then once they do get that idea of what, well, it doesn't matter what we think the consequences will be. God knows what is good. I still think that in achieving that good, they'll probably be applying utilitarianism.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, they're not doing the version of it where they're trying to achieve the most happiness for the most people, though, right?
Yeah. It just what they consider to be utility is going to be vastly different. It's good. It's not just going to be like, oh, I think utility is happiness. Oh, I think utility is safety. It's going to be a form of utility that is still utility, but is really out there, just in the way that like they conceptualize it and see it to be applied.
Yeah. And I don't know how well you know the Bible, but you know the story of where like Abraham goes to like sacrifice his son Isaac on the like God.
Yeah, that story. I want to be honest, dude. I read that story. I'm like, God, okay. If God, if you're out there, okay. I mean,
I
I'm coming
actually
from a good
think
place
this
here.
is the point of the story. It's that
Yeah,
God knows
it's
better than you, no matter how terrible you think something appears to be in terms of the
that's no,
consequences.
dude. I'm sorry. It's just like people are like, oh, you know, the Jesus died for our sins, the new covenant, so you don't have to worry about any of the Old Testament stuff, bro. Jesus may have died for our sins, but that the implications that those things were still sins, and that God, it's not like Jesus was like, oh, God was wrong. Jesus like gave us the hall pass, and bro, some of those, especially the one where Abraham kills his son or is about to kill his son, that's
Yeah.
just fucked up to me. I'm sorry. Like I read that story, I'm just like, this is like a demon that is like this is like something I'd put in my D&D game, like when they burst in and save the villagers from the brainwashed cult. I'm sorry, but Jesus Christ, man.
I have that same feeling about it. Like, of course, like it just reads to me like this horrific story, but I actually think it's supposed to be horrific. It's supposed to.
Yeah. I think you're 100% right in the intention, but that just makes it worse to me. It's like, yeah, dude, you should try to kill your kid if God tells you, because God's never wrong. He's never wrong.
I think that, yeah. Well,
It's
anybody
like,
who
oh my God, I got another phone call. I gotta leave.
Anybody who does buy into that reasoning, though, I have a hard time calling them utilitarian. Like, I get that you know, in a sense, you kind of can, because you could say like they're making
They're
decisions.
probably only a yeah. They're probably only a utilitarian, I think, when it comes to the application, which I still think is pretty relevant. But no, that's actually fair. There probably is a good chunk of people that are like fundamental. Although I don't know. I mean, because it is just a different conception of utility. They're not using utilitarianism to arrive by which. Because like here's the question. I think I think my belief that human suffering is bad and we ought prioritize removing human suffering.
Yeah.
That is just as unjustified. Like I'm not arriving to that through any at that level. I'm not a utilitarian,
It's
and
just I
that
don't
seems to
like
me just
suffering.
as
Yeah.
that seems just as or that seems just as valid or sound as like the religious beliefs of like people that utility is God's will.
Um. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree that both of those are things that you could just arbitrarily feel and then just decide that like this is the
But I still
end
feel
that
like
I'm
I'm a
pursuing.
utilitarian, though. So I feel like that can't be. It feels like if that logic is disqualifying to being utilitarian, then I would have to be disqualified as well.
Yeah, I don't think that does disqualify either of you from being utilitarian. I think what's the difference between those two is whether you think about the decision in terms of consequences. And then usually when we say utilitarianism, what we usually mean is like happy maxing, basically, right? It's like
Yeah,
try to get the most happiness and the least
harm
suffering.
reduction.
Like for the most people, and then maybe you extend it to things other than people, maybe not, but um, so they're certainly not happy maxing when they follow those rule sets. They like you said, they've got a different conception of utility. But I think what separates it from whether it's utilitarianism or not is whether they're thinking about it in terms of consequences. Like, are they making that moral decision to obey God on the basis that they believe obeying God is a thing that has good consequences and leads to good utility, which they might think of it that way and they might not.
Okay. No, yeah, that's fair. I think it's they're much more they aren't full blown utilitarians. They only start to use that logic when you get really far down to like the applied ethics. I think that's like the lowest of the three tiers. Like those people would only be a utilitarian in the sense of like, oh well, if we could get +5 God points or +10 God points -2 God points, what do you choose? They're like, let me give the +10 -2. But okay, no, that I think that's actually fair. That's like that is a significant enough asterisk, I think, to make you think more about the consequence. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think between that and then the fact that when you said like all people, like the first thing that immediately came to mind. I mean, maybe this is a silly objection, but it's the thing about like children and like when we're growing up, we haven't learned to expect consequences or whatever. Like I think that's like a smaller asterisk because like it's fairly obvious to me that that's probably not what you meant. But if I
True.
nitpick, yeah.
What about infants that aren't conscious yet? Checkmate.
Yeah, well, they're obviously utility maxing, and we just can't tell because
Goo goo gaga max it.
a good. Yeah, they're Goo Goo Gaga maxing, and we're just not smart enough to keep up with them.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
I don't know. I think that's about all I got on this one. I think I'm gonna rate this one as I mostly agree with your with your take. Actually, like now that I've understood a little better what you meant by it, I think it's more right than wrong.
W.
So yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add on this? On
No,
this
I
one?
think yeah, I think we're good on this.
Okay. Okay. All right. So my first spicy take here is that I am under some limited circumstances pro death penalty, which is something that maybe in the broader world, I'm not sure how much of a hot take that is, but in a Twitch poll context, I feel like it's a really hot take. Like I'm not sure if I've met a single other Twitch poll person who agrees with me about this.
Okay, yeah. What are these contexts that you're pro death penalty in?
Okay, so first of all, I think I should say a couple of things that I don't mean, right? I don't mean that all executions are good. I don't even mean that most executions are good or that the executions are good on average. It's basically just that executions can sometimes be good. Not all of them are bad. And if we had a society that was just like deciding as wisely as possible on our criminal sentencing and that we could like trust the judgment of the people who are doing this, that sometimes the right option would be to kill the person.
Okay, yeah. When is it the right? Like what are the factors that make it good?
Okay, so I think here's what you need. First of all, the person needs to have done something like pretty horrific to prove that they're like a really dangerous person. And I think that we have to believe that they're so dangerous that it's not worth the risk of trying to rehabilitate them or house them with other prisoners. And I think we also have to be extremely, extremely confident that they're guilty of the thing that they're accused of. And I think that this is the big thing where I part with a lot of real world objections or executions. I meant is that I think I would not want to execute like serial killers, for example, but I would want to execute like a school shooter who gets caught in the act. Because like if they just do the thing in public in front of lots of people, they're on camera. Or like, you know, Anders
There's
Breivik.
no doubt that they actually did it, yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt that they acted. I mean, Anders Breivik, I think he killed like 77 people or something like that, and he just did it in public. And there is no doubt whatsoever that the guy did it. He's remains unrepentant after having done it, and is very likely just a dangerous person who, you know, like I'm not even sure that I would consider it safe enough to even just throw him in prison for life. Like I would rather that he just stop existing.
Okay, yes, yeah, I think that's where we're going to disagree. I would be totally in favor of, I think, the death penalty in situations where where there is a real risk of them causing further harm to people by escaping or by being released, right? Like if you foiled someone who had if there was someone who was credibly attempting to do something that would like unilaterally exterminate the human race, that's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, even if there's like a 0.0001% chance that when this person gets out, they do it again, you don't let them out. And by that logic, you probably also justify killing them to prevent escape, even if then there's a very, very small percent chance that they escape. I think where I disagree, though, is I'm going to have a pretty high bar for that in the context of the real world. So, like, I don't know how I would, like, when it was the Wild West, like, or El Chapo, like in Mexico, where they actually have people escaping from prisons. Yeah, okay, we're probably just gonna start executing you now. I'm sorry, but like, we're not gonna run the risk of you getting back out. But in America, it's like, bro, no one's escaping from the prisons. Either they're too dangerous to be let back into society, in which case they're in there for life, or they're not, in which case you let them out. I think I would really struggle to think of scenarios in like America where I would support the death penalty. Only the only context I can think of is the idea that they would represent a significant threat to other prisoners and a threat in such a way that you couldn't reform it. Because I think like a lot of the problems with our prisons could be solved in ways that wouldn't involve just killing the prisoners. Like there's probably better ways to like make sure our prisons aren't like violent shitholes where people are, you know, assaulted and victimized.
Yeah, generally speaking, I agree with like pretty much everything you said. I think you're right to have a high bar for who should be executed. I think vast majority of prisoners, and probably even the vast majority of people who are on death row in real life, should probably not be executed. I also agree with the point that like one of the big reasons to do it is that it could be potentially a danger to other prisoners, and that if you could reform them instead, that's the preferable option, right? But I think there's a non-zero number of people who clear that high bar, who are a danger to other prisoners, or at least we expect them to be, and who we don't think are worth the risk of trying to reform them. And I think it's like a very small number of people, but I think it's not zero.
Yeah, do you think that? Would you say that these are like psychopaths, or like who are these people to you?
Like, okay, if somebody just, I'm not sure whether to call them psychopaths or something. I'm not sure if I want to like medicalize it that way, but basically like. Like if you just want like a pretty easy example, like if somebody just shows up at an elementary school and shoots 20 people and just does it in public, gets caught in the act, and they're on camera, and there's just like literally no doubt about who did it, and they're just unrepentant, like basically that's the person who clears the bar for me. It's just I don't think we have a realistic hope of trying to reform them, or at least it's not worth the risk. They're a seemingly very dangerous person. They've given us a lot of evidence for that. I do think they pose a risk to other prisoners. I also think that that keeping a person, like if you had to like keep them in solitary confinement for life, I think that's like quite possibly worse than death. I think that's effectively just torture.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know if I agree. I think that there are ways to house that person in prison, and without them being where the danger of them harming other prisoners is lower than I think the utility of killing a person, even a person that is like a school shooter. The thing that I wonder about is how realistic. This is I think an argument in favor of your position. Not to say that you're making it, but it's just something I've thought about in with other positions. Is okay, yeah, there are other ways to solve this problem. Instead of killing them, we could just reform the prison system so it doesn't do that. But then you're like, oh, but then you realize that you're saying, oh, just fix prisons, bro. Simple. It's like that's not simple. That's really really hard. A long
And
time
even if we
ago.
did it, the number of people I'm talking about would probably still not be zero.
Yeah. Um, No, yeah, 100%. Just in that specific example of like someone like shooting people in broad daylight.
Yeah, I'm all in
There
favor of
was a
reforming prisons. By the way, I don't want me to
yeah,
be
yeah, of
arguing
course, of
against
course.
that.
Yeah.
But
No, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. But the argument that gives me pause is sometimes when we talk about, oh well, there's a deeper underlying problem. Sometimes deeper underlying problems are not the thing you want to fix. Sometimes you do want to do a patch over, like sometimes you do want to give someone like something that addresses the symptoms. Sometimes you do want to patch over. You can't always deconstruct everything to get to the bottom of the problem. And I think this actually has some very troubling implications for certain arguments. I was arguing with Doobie a long, long time ago on a Prime panel where he was talking about whether or not LGBT parents should be allowed to adopt children because those children are more likely to have bad outcomes. And I made the argument that, well, hold on, Doobie. If we're going to take away kids from parents who are part of a group that statistically have worse outcomes for their kids, like poor people are going to be number one, and I'm sure there's plenty of minorities as well because they're disproportionately poor. And he made the argument, well, that's because of socioeconomic conditions, which are solvable. And I made the
are
argument,
they?
yeah, well, they're solvable, but not in the short term. And if you think about it from the perspective of saving the kids, which is how these kind of arguments are framed. You wouldn't ever be like, oh my God, that baby is in a burning car. And it's like, oh my God, we need better vehicle safety standards. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, we can do that in the future because you're certainly not going to fix these problems in the short term. You're certainly not going to, prevent the children that are already in poor families from having worse outcomes than their rich counterparts. And that is the kind of thing that makes me wonder about this. This is like, I say, oh, just fix prisons, bro. It's like that's not a thing you just do. And you absolutely could just do in many places in the country get people more on board with executions. I mean, people are bloodthirsty, vicious animals, and horrible. So you absolutely could do that. So I don't know. Actually, I'm starting to come more around to this argument.
Um, with regard to the example you were giving about your conversation with Doobie, like I've heard the opposite claimed, but I've heard it said before. I don't know for sure that this is true, but I've heard it said that LGBT parents tend to have better outcomes, and the reasoning that I've heard for this is because all of them choose to be parents. There's no like oopsie babies in there, so like they're gonna tend to. First of all, only have parents when they really, or I'm sorry, only have kids when they really want to, when they feel like they're ready. And secondly, they have to pass like a screening process in order to be able to adopt.
Yeah, I think they actually do have better outcomes. This argument was a long time ago, and I don't even know. I want to be clear. Dewey oftentimes makes arguments that he doesn't believe in just to explore the thought train. So I don't put anything on Dewey. I do believe that is true. I think he might have actually been making an argument about they're more likely to be LGBT, which itself carries like a risk for mental problems or something like that. But yeah, no, I don't know. Is it possible? So the question. Okay, here's the question I need to ask myself: how bad is it to kill a person? That's shot up a school, versus how bad is it to let them back into society? I don't know. I'm not convinced that there's a significant group of people that represent a really big risk to society when you let them back out of prison.
I agree. There's not a significant group of people to do this.
That would be and such a significant risk that even the chance of it makes me think, oh, I'm just going to kill you, especially when you get into like pre-crime territory there.
Right. And this is why I think executions should be extremely rare. I think there are very, very few people who should be executed, and it's only if you've done something extremely heinous and you appear to have like no realistic chance of rehabilitation, and there's just like no realistic doubt whatsoever that you did the thing. So like school shooters or like Anders Breivik or something. Those are like my go-to examples for this. Yeah. So like I feel like a pretty decently strong argument against the thing I'm saying is like, okay, but if we have a law that allows the death penalty, do we really trust people to make that decision though, right? Because even if there's like 2 people a year who should be executed, that could easily turn into 40 people a year getting executed just because
you wouldn't trust the system to actually make that determination because it's such a difficult one to make in the first place that it's better to not at all.
Right, and I like, in my opinion, of all the conversations I've had on this, like I think that's the strongest counter argument I've heard, and I think it is actually sufficient to make me think I'm pretty hesitant about supporting death penalty as it exists today. I might like if the only choice was have death penalty as we have it today or abolish it, I think I'd probably abolish it rather than just have it as we had it today.
Yeah.
But if no,
I think I'm mostly on board.
Okay, I have one other argument that I want to make about this too, which is I think almost everyone agrees that extrajudicial killings are sometimes justified, right? Like that police and military can kill people
sometimes, but in the same way you don't trust our government to actually implement your system, right. I don't trust the internet to implement my take, because like, oh my god, there's so many people that are like, oh yeah dude, when that father went and shot the pedophile in the head who was going to trial and shit like this, or it's like extrajudicial stuff is justified when you're living in Nazi Germany. And like, I'm sorry, like even when you suffer immense personal tragedy, you're not living in Nazi Germany, okay? It's only okay to do extrajudicial stuff when the system is like beyond like saving, I think.
Yeah, so I agree with you in, well, no, actually, like I mostly agree with what you just said. I think there can be rare instances of extrajudicial killings being justified even in a system that's otherwise functioning mostly fine. And I'll go to like a school shooter example again, right? Like if we caught a school shooter in the act, but you know, if the choice was like you could just kill him on the spot to stop this guy's like in the middle of a rampage, he's about to shoot more people.
Like self-defense, yeah. When you said extrajudicial, I'm not sure if you said killings or murder, now that I've got it in my head, but I thought you meant murder, as in like it's not a self-defense or trying to stop them from inflicting further harm.
Oh, no, I guess what I meant was like, hypothetically, like some police are trying to stop a school shooter that's in progress, and like one of the ways they can do this is to kill him, and I think sometimes they'd be right to do that.
Oh yeah, many times.
Right. So I feel like it's actually a really hard case to make to say that these people should be killed extrajudicially, but should not be killed in like by a legal process, as if that's worse. Like I get the argument is that like they're an imminent danger in one case, and the other case they're not. But it's not that they're not a danger, it's just that the danger is protracted over decades because you're going to throw them in prison with a bunch of other prisoners to whom they're a danger.
Yeah, and I think the key is that the danger is so obvious that the chance of being wrong is basically none. If you are going to go and extrajudicially kill someone, and it's in a self-defense situation, you know that they actually were. But if you go out and you think, oh, I think this guy is going to, right, then obviously becomes a much bigger question. I think that's like my core problem. The problem is like if you start saying like, yep, sometimes it's okay, people are going to go and they're going to be incorrect with it. Not to say that there are no situations where there are no situations where it is correct.
I pretty much 100% agree with what you just said right now. It is I think it's I don't trust people's judgment to make decisions about when they should kill others, and this is why like I'm very hesitant to endorse that we should currently have the death penalty, or that people should just be shooting it in self-defense, because I think you're just going to have such a large number of fuck-ups if you just present people with those kinds of justifications. I'm very hesitant about that. But my take is basically just that like sometimes they would be right to do it, a non-zero number of times.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Okay. I got nothing more to add on this one. Do you have anything else?
No, yeah, I think we're good to go.
All right. What do we got next?
Okay. Now, this is a little bit of I'm kind of wording this in a way that's a little more spicy than what I actually mean. But I really don't like how abortion is treated as a woman's issue. And
Okay.
I think it mostly isn't. Abortion
Really?
fundamentally comes down to the question of whether or not the fetus is a human life. If it is a human life, there's probably almost no justification to ever kill it, outside of very, very specific situations, like the mother of the life is at risk. I don't buy any of the libertarian, like, oh, well, the fetus did not ask for consent to enter your womb, so you can kill it. I don't think that's valid. And I really think this is problematic, especially when it comes to the effect, because the effect is on the left, we make so many bad arguments about abortion. We're constantly talking about, oh, Republicans, it's about controlling women. It's because they hate women. And I don't buy any of these arguments. I think there are undoubtedly some Republicans that, the needle on abortion is undoubtedly being moved a little bit by the fact that it relates to women so much. But there's a big, big reason that this has been such a contentious issue for so long, and it's because there's a really hard question there. There's a really hard question as to, well, we wouldn't let you kill, the fetus as soon as it's out of the body when it's born, but some point going far back enough, there is like a line where it's no longer human. That's really hard, and it's entirely understandable that some people would feel uncomfortable and be like, I don't want to take the risk that we're, killing hundreds of thousands of babies every single year if we're wrong about this, so I just want to have them all go through. But instead of engaging with that, we so often, I feel like on the left, just say, oh, you hate women, you're sexist, right? It's basically just another form of throwing the word racist around. And as a result, I think we lose so much ground. Because you say, oh, people support abortion because they hate women, and every single person who, supports abortion is like, oh, this person has no idea what the fuck they're talking about, I'm just going to ignore everything they say. And then they don't just ignore you when you do make the good arguments, but we don't make the good arguments. People will say, why do you support abortion? Because I don't hate women. Full stop. And don't even go into the reasons why I think there's actually a very strong case for why a fetus isn't a human being with moral value. So I really do not like the framing of abortion as a women's issue. Obviously, it affects women much more than everyone else. But I don't like framing it as an issue about the autonomy of women's bodies or anything like that. And I think the results of it are quite disastrous.
Okay. This went a really different direction than I thought you were gonna go when you first started giving the take, because when you started saying I hate that we frame it as a women's issue, I thought you were actually gonna go into the direction of like fathers' rights or something. But
W. No, I don't. No, not
no.
really.
I think there is a little bit of validity to the father's rights thing, but not that a father should necessarily be able to dictate to the mother what to do, but I think it's at least good for the mother to take into consideration what the father has to say. Okay, so let me see. I when you said you hate that we treat it as a women's issue, I felt like right at the end there you actually kind of pointed out the reason we do treat it as a women's issue, which is that the effect that it has on
Yeah.
women. Right?
It literally does affect women, but I don't think it is proper to still frame it as a woman's issue, because it matters to women as our conclusion does. But I don't think any of the internal logic is reliant on the fact that they are women, and people often pretend that it does. People on the left very often will say the reason why Republicans are against abortion is because it's women. There is a line that's often repeated, which is that if pregnancies affected men, there would be abortions available at every corner gas station, and I really don't agree with that whatsoever. I think there'd be like a very, very small change in terms of how big of an issue it would be, but it'd still be very contentious.
I can give some credence to this in the sense that I think people who want to outlaw abortion are not literally doing it because they hate women in almost any case. Like that's almost never their reasoning for doing it. But I think when people say that, it's because I think there's basically two competing interests that they have to choose between here, and it's like the life of the fetus versus the ability of the woman to choose whether to continue the pregnancy, right? And I think this is basically what each side of the issue of this issue is doing is actually just prioritizing one of those over the other one.
I think they are prioritizing differently, but I don't think if it was the case that God descended from the heaven heavens, and he entered the mind of every, libtard SJW, and they all of a sudden all realized categorically, definitively, no bullshitting, no cognitive dissonance any way around it, fetuses past 2 months are human beings. They're 100% conscious. They definitively have moral value. I think they would. I think all the pro-abortion people would basically change overnight. I don't think there's
Really?
almost any world. Yeah, I don't think there's almost any world where you can actually like justify within our moral system the idea that, well, it is a human life, but we're still going to prioritize the woman outside of very specific situations, like where the mother's life is at risk. I think in those scenarios, at that point, it's a life for a life. But in the many, many abortions where that isn't the case, I think if it was the case that fetuses were human lives, there's like no possible way to justify it.
Okay, so I do think that would be persuasive to some. I don't know how many people, but I think it would be at least a significant number of pro-choice people would change their minds if they suddenly came to believe that a fetus is a human life. I don't really think it's all of them, because I think there are some people who really do believe like it is okay to kill a human to protect your own like bodily autonomy, or however they want to put that, right? And I've heard these kind of comparisons made to like, well, if somebody's gonna rape you, is it okay if you kill them? It's like, and I think the answer to that. I mean, the answer is going to be like, it depends, right? It's not always okay to like kill somebody that's gonna rape you, but I think sometimes it is, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. I think this is going to come down to a disagreement about where people would land if they did have this belief. I think if it was the case that everyone who's pro-choice came to genuinely believe that these fetuses hold moral weight, moral value, like 80-90% would become pro-life. I think there might be a significant group that try to lie to themselves, or have some sort of cognitive dissonance. But I think the number of people that would actually say, nope, it is a moral life and it's still okay to do abortion in cases where the mother's life isn't at risk, or cases where the mother wasn't raped, I think that number would be astonishingly small.
Why do you say that it would be astonishingly small?
I think that it is very difficult for a normal person. I think for the vast majority of people, it is not easy. It is It is almost impossible to morally justify the idea that, well, the utility that I'm going to lose out of being pregnant is greater than this innocent person's life.
I mean, I can for sure like see some people thinking that, right? Because I do think there are some people who consider themselves pro-choice, like just on the basis that they don't count this as a human, and therefore like they're killing a thing, but it's not a person, and therefore like it doesn't outweigh the bodily autonomy thing. Bockel in chat says, I don't know about that. I mean, if we find out babies don't unlock consciousness until like 2 years old, I can't imagine anyone would be in favor of post-birth abortion. I think that's generally right, that most people would still not want to kill babies even if they're not conscious. But there have literally been human cultures and societies that did allow parents to kill their own. I mean, like ancient Rome did this. Like they allowed parents to kill their own children up to I can't remember up to what age. Like, but it was something that when I found this out, it was like kind of shocking. It was like they can kill their own children up to age like 5 or something like that. It was like, what, really?
Jesus.
So you hate that we frame it as a women's issue, but you agree that it does affect women more than anyone else. So I guess, like, what would be your preferred way of framing it?
My preferred way of framing it would be that this is fundamentally a question about the moral weight of whether or not a fetus does carry the moral weight of a person, and that it affects women far more, I mean, infinitely more, right, than men. What I don't like is fundamentally that the idea that what I don't like is the framing that women is relevant to deciding the question. Because I don't think that is true for the vast majority of people. And I think the focus on it causes us to make bad arguments and not make good arguments.
The second part of what you said, I definitely agree with. Like, framing it as a women's issue is often going to be unpersuasive to people who consider themselves pro-life, because you're not really addressing their reason for opposing it, because their reason is to save the life of the fetus. Their reason is not I hate women. They
Yeah.
may want to control women's reproduction, but they're not doing it just because they love to control women's reproduction. They're doing it because they think they need to do that to save the life of the fetus.
Yeah, and at least to me, and maybe this is just sampling bias, or I'm just interpreting, but I feel like there is a genuinely very widespread held belief in the left that a significant motivator, if not the primary motivator of Republicans being pro-life, is the misogyny. Like the George Carlin bit, people always make these horrible arguments where they say you're anti-abortion, but you don't support child care. You only care about the fetus. It's like, bro, they think it's murder. Like, I don't think you'd be able to murder people. Well, how come you don't support Medicare for all? It's like, that's not a good argument. And I think it just leads us so far astray. I think it is untrue, and the consequences of us believing it being untrue are quite significant in that it debilitates our ability to actually bring people over to our side, which then means we have more anti-abortion stuff than we otherwise would have.
I think I can agree with that the argument might be less effective when you're trying to engage with the other side.
Okay.
But like on the other hand, if you were gonna say like why ought we be pro-choice, and I think as far as I know, you and I are both like. I guess I'm legally very pro-choice. Morally, I'm a little more hesitant about it. Like I'm not sure if I whether I want to say like to what degree abortion is morally good or bad. But I think like legally, I feel like I've got to be pro-choice just because the enforcement problem is like a ridiculously heavy burden on women. And the consequences of forcing them to carry unwanted pregnancies are I think really, really bad. Buckle says that means you're pro-choice, and yeah, I think that's basically right. I mean, I'm pro-choice with some reservations, but yes, I agree. It does mean that I'm pro-choice. But yeah, anyway, and the reason that I am is basically because I see it as a women's issue, and I take that stance because because I care about the effect that it has on women, and I think is that same thing true for you?
Um, I it is, but I think yes and no. I care about it because of the way that it affects people. Those people happen to be women, and it is important to recognize that a disproportionate effect on a certain group of people is relevant, but it doesn't make it worse. If it was the case that, for example, instead of all women or all men being pregnant, it was randomly ascribed, then I still think it would be just as bad.
Okay, yes, I think I agree with what you're saying now. Maybe I misunderstood what you were saying earlier. Like
No, I just worded it. I worded it a little spicy.
like it's
The
a
old
bad
Destiny technique.
consequence. It's a bad consequence that happens to women, and we care that bad consequence is happening to women, and that's what's motivating us to get behind it. But it's not because it's women that we care about it. It's just because a bad consequence is happening to people. Does that all?
Yeah, I agree. I just tweeted out abortion is not a woman's issue, so I'm sure we'll have
Oh
plenty
my
of dialogue about that.
God.
That's okay. No, it's let me tell you what. When my 2 followers see that tweet, they're gonna be, oh my god, I can't believe this.
I feel like that's, but that's not even like really your take, because the abortion's not a women's issue, though, right? It's like,
Yeah, but you see, what I said is true from a certain point of view,
from a certain point of view, the
as
Jedi are
Obi-Wan
evil.
Kenobi once put it.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe, I think where I can meet you on this is that it is not only a women's issue, right? It's like an issue of human suffering, and also like killing a fetus does have some moral value to me, and it's so it's an issue of the life of the fetus plus the suffering of the pregnant person, but if the pregnant person happens to be a trans man, I don't care any less about it than if it's a woman, right? I don't know. I think that's probably all I've got in this one. You got anything else?
Yeah, I think we basically agree.
Okay. Um. So my next one is that I think intellectual property is bad, and I would like it to be either extremely overhauled or perhaps even abolished.
Oh, that's a tough one. What is this? Now, are you trying to draw a specific distinction between intellectual property and copyright, or are you just are you saying the same thing? Because I know there's a very like technical. I've had arguments with people where they're like, "Oh, I'm pro copyright but anti intellectual property."
Okay, I see copyright as a subset of intellectual property.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
against that, but I'm also against like patents, trademarks, all this.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I don't know. Okay, so do you want to lay out exactly why it is? I suspect I've got some idea, but
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, the rough like kind of first level approximation of what's going on is that I see property as a system of managing scarcity. Like I think this is why we own things in the first place is because they are in limited supply and we need some way to decide who gets to use the thing if there's any conflict that we have over it. And this system only makes sense, is only necessary if we are talking about scarce goods. But if we're talking about ideas or like files on a computer that are infinitely replicable, they're not just scarce because like as a physical property of what they are. I think when we make them intellectual property, we are effectively like creating scarcity to justify property, and I think that's kind of a backwards way of thinking about it. Um, We've got a chatter that says, "What about books?" Yeah, I mean, like a book is like the physical object of a
could be
book.
the text of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, the physical object of a book, I'm fine with you owning. I have a friend who's like a decently successful author, and he might get mad at me for this take if and when he hears it. But yeah, I do actually think that people should not be able to own the text of a book. By the way, I should point out that that's been true for most of human history, and people still invented things, people still created things, and I think intellectual property, the justification that I get almost every time I bring up this take is that people think it's necessary to create incentives for innovation. And I kind of halfway agree with this. I think it can create incentives for innovation. Like sometimes people do research or they create art specifically with the idea that they will own the thing. But other times they actually are locked away, like forbidden from doing a specific area of research or a specific type of art because it would violate the copyright of another person or the patent of another person. And so it can have both effects. Like it can incentivize innovation. It can also stifle innovation.
I think it can do both, but I think I think there's a much stronger argument for this in terms of art. But I think with more like I don't I guess like non-art in industry or like medicine. I think there's a much stronger argument that it is creating a lot more innovation than it is stifling. I think it's like the average cost, like bring a drug to market, is like a couple $100 million or something like this. There needs to be, it need not be necessarily IP protection. There's a lot of, I think, interesting discussion about how we should start guaranteeing money to companies for drugs the same way we did for the COVID vaccines. And that could, but then they don't get to copyright them. If we wanted to do something like that to secure that same thing, I would be super open to that potentially. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that in a current status quo, that function is being fulfilled for a lot of things by the ability to copyright and patent stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think it, like as you said, I do think it's important to have incentives for research, especially for like pharmaceuticals are just the easiest go-to example, right? And I would like for there to be some kind of funding for this stuff. I mean, if it has to be government grants, that's fine. It can be government grants. If it has to be people doing Kickstarter, Patreon type of stuff, like whatever it is, right? Not that I think we're going to have an entire economy functioning off of Kickstarter and Patreon, like to replacing intellectual property, but I agree that I want some type of incentive for things. What I don't necessarily want is for people to have a government protected monopoly on whatever work they do. And I think like almost all the usual anti-monopoly arguments apply to this. Like we want people to be able to compete because it gives market advantages and so on. Ivan asks, how will writers make a living? Okay, so if it were my goal to make art and writing and inventions as lucrative as possible, like if that's all I cared about, then I absolutely would be pro IP. And like essentially, like how will writers make a living? You know, some of them might not be able to. They might have to get a different job, and I understand that that sucks for them. And like it feels bad to sit here and say like under my system that it would put writers at a disadvantage compared to how they're at today. However, it improves accessibility for all the different inventions and artworks that people create. We can have other ways of incentivizing those things, like people can still be hired as writers or they can get grants to be writers. So some of them would still be able to make a living, although probably at a diminished rate compared to what they're doing today. I do see it as a real sacrifice, but it is a sacrifice I'd be willing to make because I think IP has so many other bad effects.
Yeah, I think I see where you're coming from, but I don't know if I would go so far with your descriptions about, or with your, how do I put this? I think that the descriptive reality of alternate prescriptions is a lot more appealing. Which is to say, I think I think you could probably get rid of like 70-80% of the bad things about IP but just by changing the system. At least 70% of the bad things that we currently have. It seems like there is just some ludicrous, egregious abuses of the copyright system currently that aren't even supposed to be part of the system as it was originally intended. You know, things like Disney always being able to renew shit like over and over and over and over and over again. Wasn't it they actually lost the copyright on Mickey Mouse like a couple years ago, and like nothing happened. Like, it was like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like we didn't need to be extending this all this time. So I think there's I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of things you're saying, but it feels like it wouldn't be that big of it would be a lot easier to just reform the current system and we could get like 80% of the way to your solution as opposed to having to really reinvent the wheel in a lot of aspects.
Okay, so I'm potentially open to this. Like I think it might be the case that reforming or weakening copyright law, I think if we were to do that, I think we're at least moving in the right direction, and I'd be happy with it. I'm not convinced that that's better than getting rid of it, but I am convinced that it's better than what we have now. With the Disney thing, I think is an interesting example because Disney has almost like a vertically integrated monopoly. Not literally a monopoly, but you know what I mean. Like they own the IP and they own the distribution platform, and they're like just distributing their own shit.
I should have written down vertical monopoly. Did you follow the Epic Games versus Apple lawsuit at all?
You know what? I remember reading about this like a year or two ago. Can you remind me what's the...
Basically, Apple has a policy where if you put a game on their app store, you have to give them a cut for any microtransactions in the game. And Epic was doing this thing where they would redirect iPhone users to do the microtransactions off of iPhone, and then they'd have access, right? So it's like you go into Fortnite on iPhone, you try to buy V-Bucks, and it says buy V-Bucks for your account on the computer. And that way, the iOS users, they would have to give that cut, and Apple was like, you can't do this, yada, yada, yada. There's a big lawsuit, and the core of like the principle came down to, is it really fair for Apple to manufacture the phone, own the software, and own the platform on which you do other software? Is this starting to become like antitrust? That was the sort of the core question. It was really interesting, and I wish that they had gone after. I think Apple like won basically everything. I really wish they had gone after Apple a little bit more because I think there's a real question to, it's something you don't think about because it's so ubiquitous in tech. But it actually is kind of weird that it's like, oh, you bought the Apple phone, gotta buy the Apple charger, can only install apps approved by Apple that Apple gets a cut from on the Apple platform. Like, imagine if you could only go to certain gas stations with certain cars. Like, that would be wild. That'd be unthinkable. But that's almost what it is for a lot of tech stuff. Like the Xbox, you can only do games that Xbox approves. There are console exclusives for this very reason. And it really starts to cut down on the market function in the way it should. You wouldn't want cars to be bought based off of the relationship they have with gas stations, right? Because it would just turn into a race of which car company can partner with the most gas stations. You want them to be choosing what's the best car. And in a similar way, man, I don't necessarily want people choosing what hardware to buy for their iPhone based off of what apps they're going to be allowed to run because of a permission checkbox. Nothing about iPhone's hardware is unique to the apps that run on iPhone. But nevertheless, there is that, people talk about the iPhone ecosystem. But it's so core to our conception of phones. Like, what is an iPhone if not, the idea of viewing the iPhone purely on its hardware? I mean, almost no one does that, right? No one's the vast majority of people aren't going and watching Marquise Brownlee's videos on the new camera and stuff. They're doing it because of the ecosystem. So at this point, are they so entangled that it isn't separate, that the phone is the platform, or would you say that they are separate and therefore shouldn't be able to have that vertical kind of monopoly?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an iPhone, but to me, it sounds like the phone is the platform.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, but I was just reminded of that when you talk about the vertical monopoly of Disney, because I think it's a sort of related concept.
Yeah, and like every piece of intellectual property is a monopoly of sorts, right? Now, a lot of them are just very narrow monopolies, right? If you have if your intellectual property is Mickey Mouse, like, okay, like then you just have this one character that nobody else is allowed to depict without your permission. And like, it's not really that big a deal for them to have a monopoly over Mickey Mouse. It's not really that harmful, although on the other hand, I'm also not necessarily convinced that the government needs to protect their exclusive right to depict Mickey Mouse. It really wouldn't be that bad if other people could do it too. Ivan in chat said, I think your argument works better for music where there are fewer available melodies. Writing books is different. One can always write a book on the same topic that does not infringe. Yeah, like, it does, okay, so I get what you're saying, because I think, like, it does seem like IP law gets particularly weird when it comes to music, because so many songs sound so much alike one another, and it's like not only is it true that there are only so many like realistic available melodies that people are going to use, but also there are just certain popular genres of music that are likely to use only like a small subset of those melodies. So it's just almost impossible to make new music without like coming really close to sounding like something that already exists. So yeah, I do agree the argument works better for music than it does for books. As far as books go, like, yeah, I mean, I pretty much do agree that if I had my way, if I got to implement my system, it probably would hurt authors on average. That's not to say it's going to put every author out of work, but I do think it would, on average, they'd be making less money. I should also point out that the money they make doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from consumers. It doesn't just magically appear, right? And if consumers had access to their work for free, then that benefits the consumers. But I get that also, like, the idea is that you're incentivizing the creation of new writing, and then it's just like, how valuable is that to us, right? Like, is it so valuable to us that we're going to give this person a limited monopoly, forbid the creation of derivative works, and have an entire like complex legal system and tons of lawsuits every year to just litigate about this kind of stuff? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the core of the question is how many artists are there that could have had careers if they had been allowed to make, Game of Thrones in space, versus how many are then going to be eliminated because they put out their thing and they weren't able to properly monetize it. And that's a really hard question to know.
Right. So what's your stance on piracy? Like, do you think it's like, under what circumstances, if ever, do you think it's okay to like pirate books, music, software, or whatever?
Piracy is really, really hard to, I think, pick a really good argument against, because the amount of people that would have bought the thing if they hadn't been pirating is, I think, a lot smaller than most people give it credit for. The problem is, when you pirate a game, you're paying $0 for it, and there's a lot of games I would pay $0 for that I wouldn't pay $60 for. So when you say, oh, well, these people are gaining access to this thing, there's undoubtedly some people that would pay for it. But I really do think that the amount of people that would, actually go buy the game that couldn't pirate it is actually quite a low percentage of people that are pirating it, because the kind of person that's unwilling to pay for a thing is going to be the kind of person that's going to really be seeking out free entertainment. So let's say, for example, you can't pirate this game, they're going to go pirate another game. And let's say you can't pirate any game, well, they're going to go play one of the free games. I think there really is a lot of people who are just going to settle for, relatively dog shit entertainment as long as it's free, and are just I've got family from New England, the old Yankee bastard that doesn't want to pay and give up a dime for anything, and I've got some of that myself. Is a real phenomenon. So I find a hard time to give any real credence to the idea of piracy as this evil, awful, wrong thing, especially when it's these motherfuckers in the gaming industry also are like, I can't believe people are pirating our game. I can believe people are pirating this dog shit. Oh my fuck, $60 when you could buy like Terraria for $20 and drop 1,000 hours in it over the course of a couple years. Although the only reason AAA games are like that is because gamers are the most insufferable pieces of shit on the fucking planet. Oh, it's gonna cost $70. The new PlayStation, all the games are gonna cost $70. Bro, that's not even keeping up with inflation. That doesn't even keep up with inflation, let alone the fact that it costs way more to make a game now, even if you took into account inflation. Games, AAA games at the very least, cost way more to make money on. Way more. And no one's willing to go on the price point. And then you act shocked that, I can't believe AAA $60 video game has day one DLC. I can. How the fuck are they supposed to make a profit? You expect all the AAA games to have this level of quality. Well, this level of quality costs way more than $60, so they've got to make their money somewhere else. Or this kind of game model is just going to go extinct. And I think that actually it has a decent chance to happen. I think that in the next 10, 15 years, you could see if not extinction, decimation of the AAA yearly $60 game. I mean, you already are starting to see it. A lot of things don't put out a new $60 game every year. And the ones that most consistently do are sport games that are filled with microtransactions because that is how they make their money. I don't know how. In order for these very high-level games to be profitable, they need to be charging way more than $60. And then I got to wonder, bro, how many people are going to go buy, what ought be a $100 game? It might be $60 here, $40 microtransactions, or it might be $100 when all these indie games are getting really good now. Like, it's funny, indie game used to mean kind of dog shit. Like, it's cool, but you can tell it was made by a team that didn't have as much money. You can't anymore. There are indie games that look fantastic. There are indie games that are super well developed, completely done, and they're everywhere. I mean, like the most popular game ever right now is like Minecraft, right? And then this started as like, I remember when I was 11 and I booted up Minecraft, and the render distance was like 5 blocks and it was the white fog and there wasn't any hunger. I played the shit out of that. So anyways, that was a long diatribe to say that I hate the video gaming industry and it has shaken my faith in capitalism.
I wouldn't mind if the AAA gaming model did go extinct. I'm not sure that would be a bad thing if it did.
Especially because it's not even like they're doing crazy shit most of the time. Like in my mind,
for your graphics, a lot of
It's like there's very few AAA games that are actually giving you a AAA gaming experience, the kind of thing an indie company can't do. Most of the time, it's just Call of Duty, Advanced Recon Commando, Black Ops Warfare 35, with some random B-list celebrity as the main villain. There's very few games like that are giving you that crazy experience. I think it's kind of like movie blockbusters. I do feel the lack of old school movie blockbusters. Like, that's why I love Top Gun Maverick so much. Is you have to go and it was this crazy blockbuster, crazy set pieces. That was something that I feel like is lacking in movie theaters. But if you exterminate AAA video games, I don't feel like you're actually losing like any crazy unique experiences that indie games aren't doing. So yeah.
Yeah. So another thing I want to point out about IP is that it not only allows the IP owner to monetize the content, it also allows them to decide when and where and how it's distributed. And so like this is a thing that I was thinking about with the piracy question is because like I was talking to my friend's wife about this. She's originally from the Philippines and like there's a lot of media from the West that just never gets legally released in the Philippines. They can't buy it even if they wanted to, and so they just pirate everything. And like, how am I going to tell her she's wrong to do that? They're not losing a sale when she.
Yeah, I think that's like that stuff is like the veganism. Like, well, what if you're stranded on an island and there are no plants to eat? It's like, okay, you're probably okay to like eat the meat then.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, like I basically agree that piracy, I think, is actually a positive contribution to the world as much as people try to demonize it. Ivan in chat says, I disagree. Having written apps that later had to compete with free VC-funded apps, I can tell you that Zero Price is qualitatively different. That's like having not written those apps myself, I do find that plausible. Like, just as a consumer, it definitely feels different to just go get something that you can get for free than it is to even get something that you have to pay $1 for. Just like the extra little bit of like oh, I have to pull out my credit card for this, like, actually does feel like a bigger cost than the dollar I would have to spend on it. I do agree that it's qualitatively different. Um, I don't know. Do we? Oh, I actually, you know what? I do have one more thing that I wanted to go into on this. I guess it's not an entirely new direction, but it's like something I wanted to go into a little bit deeper was when we were talking about pharmaceuticals and the consequences of somebody owning a patent on a pharmaceutical. Now I do realize that these laws have exceptions that like they can violate IP for the greater good or whatever shit like that, right? But you could just imagine, like, what if we took IP like maximally seriously and we just said, like, no, people, they own it and they get to decide what happens with it. This would be very, very bad every time like an important new medicine got invented, right? Like, somebody invents some really effective cancer treatment and then they get to either like charge exorbitantly for it or even like refuse to distribute it in certain places altogether. Or it would feel like we'd be like, it would feel evil to me to uphold a system like that and to say, like, no, we must allow them to own it and monetize it, because otherwise how are we going to encourage innovation? And I'm sorry, cancer patient, you have to die for this. It would just so I feel like this is the easiest case to make of where IP could conceivably be harmful. Now,
there's no doubt you need to have some sort of like reins on the horse, because otherwise, you'll. I mean, people. I think it's actually a really underserved part of American history, like the robber baron era of America, where it's like there's a reason why the whole country like elected like a whole like swath of like antitrust presidents one after the other. It got really fucking crazy. Like, these people were literally like on ANCAP simulator, like, oh, I'm just gonna raise the price of food in this town because I own the town. Ha ha! Like, you have to give me all your money now. Like, there's some crazy shit that went on.
Yeah, and a lot of the arguments I'm making against IP are basically antitrust arguments. It's like the government is not only allowing a monopoly, they're enforcing a monopoly on some particular thing, and it's often a narrow thing, but it doesn't have to be a narrow thing, right? I don't know. I feel like I've said most of what I could say in favor of this case. Do you have anything else you want to respond with? Or?
No, yeah, I think we basically agree. It's the current system is fucked, and but it's a big but I think it's there's a pretty fair amount of uncertainty about about the positives. Or current system sucks. The question is not what is the difference between no IP law and a current, but what would the difference be between no IP law and like an ideally reformed IP law? That's where you really get into the weeds, I think, where we have some uncertainty. But that's totally fair because it's a really hard question to answer.
Do you have any opinions at all about what an ideally reformed IP law would look like?
I think you've got to just take a fucking hatchet to the ability to renew stuff for art. The reality is we should have gotten Star Wars parodies and stuff like this now, and the current media landscape doesn't seem to suggest that you would have like a destruction of the ability to tell stories or things like that. And when it comes to, I think, industry stuff, there needs to be certain guarantees. Is a much more positive system. Of saying like, oh, you develop a cancer cure, we're going to give you $2 billion, and then that shit is and then that shit is free to use wherever you want. Anyone can make their own cancer cures, assuming they've got the facilities and stuff to do that. That stuff I think worked really, really well with the COVID vaccine. So I'd be super curious to see that get trialed more and more, especially because it gives such a stronger, I think, guarantee if you can make the medicine to know that you know exactly what you're going to be able to get out of it. So I feel like there's a lot of positive gain to be had there.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with what you said, that if I had to keep IP law but reform it in some other way, I would want to do it in a way to facilitate easier distribution and creation of derivative works and get rid of the monopoly aspect of it, but instead have people have an ability to monetize their their IP in a different way. Like perhaps you own it up until the point you release it, or something like that, right? Like
Yeah.
you could work on
Or
commission.
you could supplement it as well. You could be like, we'll give you an upfront payment, but your copyright is only going to be 2 years or something like this. The current system is so comically bad that there's lots of different things we could try out. That would all probably be better.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're actually like pretty close to the same position on this one then. Yeah.
Right on.
So let's see. That one was mine. So I think we each have one more if you want to do one more.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got this. This one's going to be a little different
Okay.
than the previous ones we've done. Give me a second to get a link. One quick second here. Oh God, here we go. Okay, so I am going to read you this article about an upcoming law, and I'm curious what your take is going to be. And then because I think we're going to disagree. And if you don't disagree, I'm going to take the opposite position because I've got to prepare to debate this point on a panel soon anyways.
Oh, okay. What's the...
Okay. Domestic abusers face crackdown in raft of new measures. Tougher management of most dangerous abusers and new protections from victims. This is the official. This is not an article. I should be clear. This is something put out by the government of the UK. Domestic abusers will face tags and tougher management under new measures to protect women and girls. The new proposals go further than ever before in protecting women and girls from harassment, aggression, and violence, and focus on stopping domestic abuse before it takes place. The law will be changed so that for the most dangerous domestic abusers will be watched more closely. For the first time, controlling or coercive behavior will be put on a par with physical violence, which will mean offenders sentenced to a year or more imprisonment or a suspended sentence will automatically be actively managed by the police, prison, and probation services under multi-agency public protection arrangements. A range of agencies will have a legal duty to cooperate to manage the risks posed by these dangerous offenders. This will make it easier to deliver a joined-up approach to protect the public. While we are pursuing this legislation, police and probation service will start work immediately to ensure that from now, offenders sentenced to a year or more for controlling or coercive behavior are recorded on the violent and sex offender register so that they don't fall through the cracks. In addition, abusers could be fitted with a tag, preventing from going within a certain distance of a victim's home, and made to attend a behavior change program as part of a trial of domestic abuse protection notice and domestic abuse protection orders in 3 areas in the UK. Also from today, 20th of February, those at risk of or suffering from domestic abuse will be able to receive emergency help from one of 18 job centers and job and benefit offices across the United Kingdom, and a new postcode checker will tell them the nearest location to access the service. The Ask for ANI, Action Needed Immediately scheme, is already in operation in over 5,000 pharmacies across the United Kingdom and over 88 cities, towns, and villages. It is delivered in partnership with HESTA's Safe Spaces. Anyone who is suffering from or fearful of domestic abuse can ask for ANI, and they will be guided to a safe and private space and offered support to call the police or specialist domestic abuse services. Since the scheme launched in 2021, emergency support has been accessed on an average once a week. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said, quote, "No woman or girl should have to feel unsafe in her home or community, and I'm determined to stamp out these appalling crimes." Quote, "The Ask at Any scheme provides a lifeline for anyone suffering from domestic abuse, and we will continue to expand the scheme so that more people can access it, including piloting this service in the first job centers." Quote, "As well as extra support for victims, we're making it a priority for the police to tackle violence against women and girls and toughening up the way offenders are managed, preventing more of these crimes from happening in the first place, and bringing more perpetrators to justice." End quote. Government will also require police forces to treat violence against women and girls as a national threat, as set out in our new strategic policing requirement published today. This means tackling these crimes will be as important as tackling threats like terrorism, serious and organized crime, and child sexual abuse. On top of this, the National Police Chiefs Council is writing to every force in England and Wales to reiterate the expectation that forces must proactively identify the most dangerous domestic abusers in their area to prevent them from committing further crimes. To support this, the Home Office will help develop a new risk assessment tool so that police forces can quickly identify domestic abusers most likely to commit the greatest harm, even where they have no conviction, and stop them in their tracks. Home Secretary Suella Braverman said, quote, "Domestic abuse is a despicable crime that leads to people's closest relationships becoming a frightening existence of torment, pain, fear, and anxiety. It is completely unacceptable, and as Home Secretary, I'll do everything in my power to stop it. The wide-ranging measures announced today will mean the most dangerous offenders will be watched more closely and added to the violent and sex offender register. Also, police forces in England and Wales will now have to treat violence against women and girls as a national threat, and more victims will be protected from harm. The full set of measures being set up today include 1. Tougher management of the most dangerous offenders. The government will change the law law to ensure that offenders with a conviction of controlling or coercive behavior who are sentenced to 12 months or more imprisonment or a suspended sentence are automatically eligible to be managed by the police, prison, and probation services under multi-agents public protection arrangements. This means agencies will have a legal duty to cooperate to manage the risks posed by these dangerous domestic abuse offenders. These offenders will also be added to the violent and sex offender register going forward. 2. Piloting new civil orders. The Home Office and Ministry of Justice will pilot the new domestic abuse protection notices and orders in Gwent, Greater Manchester, and 3 London boroughs, Croydon, Bromley, and Sutton, with the Metropolitan Police, British Transport Police, and other criminal justice partners. The new cross-jurisdictional order will provide flexible, longer-term protection for victims. The court will be able to impose requirements such as attendance on perpetrator behavior change programs, alongside electronic monitoring, and making it mandatory for offenders to notify the police of a name and address change. Breach of any requirement will be a criminal offense. 3. Ask for ANI code word scheme pilot. Building on the success of the scheme in pharmacies across the UK, domestic abuse victims will be able to ask for ANI in 18 job centres and job and benefit offices through a pilot launching today across the UK, and receive support from trained staff member who will guide them to a safe and private space where they can help a victim call the police or support services. A new postcode checker has also been launched today to enable anyone to find their nearest participating pharmacy, job centre, or jobs benefit office. 4. Adding violence against women and girls to the strategic policing requirement. The Home Secretary has published a new strategic policing requirement which for the first time categorizes violence against women and girls as a national threat and sets expectations about how this threat should be tackled by police forces. 5. Identifying dangerous perpetrators before conviction. The government will develop a new digital tool which will be able to use police data to identify individuals who are at high risk and likely to commit domestic abuse offenses. The tool will also include perpetrators without conviction in the year ending March 2022, and there were 910,980 domestic abuse-related crimes recorded by the police in England and Wales, compared to 40,647 convictions. 6. Strengthening Clare's Law. We have published new guidance which reduces the time frame for police to disclose information about individuals' violent or abusive behavior through the scheme known as Clare's Law, meaning it will be quicker to access information on a partner's or ex-partner's previous abuse or violent offending. The guidance will be placed on statutory footing next month. 7. Funding specialist victim support programs. Up to 8.4 million pounds will be allocated over 2 years to fund projects run by specialist organizations to provide tailored trauma-informed support from the 1st of April 2023. And 8. Investing in perpetrator interventions. Police and crime commissioners will be granted up to £36 million over the next 2 years for tackling perpetrators through interventions which directly address abusers' behavior, bringing total funding for these projects to more than £70 million since 2022. In April 2021, the Landmark Domestic Abuse Act updated the definition of domestic abuse, recognizing that it refers to a range of abusive behavior. Physical, sexual, violent, or threatening psychological, emotional, and coercive or controlling acts are now recognized as criminal abuse. And then there's some more quotes, but that's the core of the what is being implemented in this bill.
Okay, so this is the first time I've heard of this, and initially I'm having these conflicted reactions, because I do think domestic abuse is a really big deal that people should take seriously and try to do something about it, and I'm glad that they care about it, and it seems like they have if we take them at their word that they really are just going for the most dangerous abusers, then it seems like they've got a really good system to handle that and to help out women who are involved in the most abusive relationships. So on that's what I've got to say positive about it. And then there's two pretty big asterisks to this where I'm just not sure what to think, but it's giving me a lot of hesitation. And one of them is where it says controlling and coercive behavior, right? And it seems like that's very non-specific, right? Now I have to agree that the most extreme instances of controlling or coercive behavior where it's either very intense or very persistent probably should be treated as domestic abuse, should be taken very seriously. It's I'm not sure if this law is actually restricted to those, or because it seems like I want to believe that this is going to come to a court and people will have some kind of common sense interpretation of it where they say okay, we're not just going to treat every tiny little instance of controlling or coercive behavior as if it's domestic abuse.
To be clear, on the controlling coercive behavior, that is for people. This just changes how people who are sentenced to controlling and coercive behavior for 12 months or more, or a suspended sentence of coercive controlling behavior, they are then automatically eligible to be managed by the police after they get out. But this doesn't introduce any new way to charge people or charge people for that stuff. It's at least my understanding of the reading of this.
Oh, I guess I misunderstood that then. What the point about the controlling and coercive behavior is more that like if they were already charged with domestic violence and then they do controlling or coercive behavior after
I think the point is that if you were convicted of coercive or controlling behavior in a relationship, you weren't subject to the same controls that they put on people who were subject to like actual, I think, domestic abuse. The specific quote is, the government will change the law to ensure that offenders with a conviction of controlling or coercive behavior who are sentenced to 12 months or more imprisonment or a suspended sentence are automatically eligible to be managed by the police, prison, and probation services under multi-agent public protection arrangements. This means agencies will have legal duty to cooperate to manage the risk posed by these dangerous domestic abuse offenders. These offenders will also be added to the violent and sex offender register going forward. So I think this specific prong only has to deal with what they're allowed or expected to do for people that are sentenced already. But I don't think it changes the sentencing.
Okay, so I guess this means that they already do have some law in place against controlling and coercive behavior. Okay. I thought it was establishing a new category of domestic abuse, but I suppose not. It's instead just changing what do we do about it in the case where
that specific prong, yes.
Okay. That makes me a lot less hesitant about that particular asterisk then, right? And then the other asterisk that made me hesitate was the thing about gosh, what did it say?
The predictive.
What's that?
The digital prediction tool.
Yes, that one, right? Where they're like anticipating who might commit these crimes in the future, and I sort of feel like, okay, that could make sense under the condition that someone has already been a domestic abuser before, already been convicted of these crimes. Then it makes sense to anticipate who's most likely for recidivism or whatever. I don't know how to phrase that, but like who's most likely to commit those crimes again. But it wasn't really phrased in a way where it's clear that that's how they're applying it. It kind of sounded like they might just be like anticipating that somebody might do controlling or coercive behavior when they haven't yet done that. And that, if that's what it is, then I'm very hesitant about that.
Yeah, I think this prong has to do with domestic abuse generally, not specific controlling and coercive. The quote is 5, the government will develop a new digital tool which will use police data to identify individuals who are at high risk and likely to commit domestic abuse offenses. So that's just domestic abuse offenses, I think, generally. It's not specific to violence versus coercive or controlling. It's whatever the charges are. And it says the tool will also include perpetrators without conviction. In the year ending March 2022, there were 910,000 domestic abuse related crimes recorded by the police compared to only 40,647 convictions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that one.
That's definitely the one that is a little more contentious than all the others.
I feel like I don't know what to think about that. It seems like I can imagine that going really badly if like the idea that people are going to get into legal trouble because some process has determined that they're statistically likely to do domestic abuse.
I think, yeah, the thing that is up to interpretation here is what does identifying mean? Because it says it will allow police to identify individuals who are high risk to commit. What actions will be taken as a result of that? Because it certainly isn't going to be the fact that they're like, oh, you're now arrested for a crime you haven't committed. Because that would require like actual new laws. So I'm curious what then the application of that tool would be. Because I could imagine some things that I'm very on, but that would make me very okay with this. The way in which they're talking about making information about that domestic abuse more available, keeping an eye on that person. These are things that, especially in the context of domestic abuse, is something I'm a lot more favorable to. I've been signed up to be the primary defender of this bill on a WIC panel, I think, next Monday. And there are some people that I think are very much not going to like this.
Geez, I'm still trying to wrap my head around like why is it that they're trying to do this like anticipatory thing.
Well, I think the reason is that like the story you always hear repeated in domestic abuse is that the police came by, were like, okay, we can like we are allowed to lock him up for a day because he was yelling at you, but until he like actually attacks you, we can't do anything. And then he attacks the woman and kills her.
Right. So what this means to me is that like you really could get somebody getting arrested on the expectation that they're going to do something, right? It's not going to be just purely on the statistical expectation, but the statistical expectation may help them build a case, which then leads to people getting into legal trouble.
Yeah, I think the the other aspect of that is the tagging system, but that's only for people that are already convicted. It's not clear to me what, if anything, they're going to be doing with the people that they identify with the digital tool.
Right, and I think it even did say that it's going to include some people who are as of yet unconvicted of any.
Yes, it's going to include reports of crime. It's not going to only be drawing off of conviction.
Right, so presumably that's going to mean some version of those people are going to be under greater scrutiny.
Yeah, I think I gotta imagine it means something like that. I think the also is there's probably some framework that the UK already has for managing people, or for keeping an eye on people that are at risk of domestic abuse, and it might tie into that. But I don't know what that is the problem.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I just don't know exactly like what to even say about this. I mean, like, okay, I think like obviously I don't have the it was like a whole big long article that you read and I don't have it all memorized, but it sounded like they had quite a lot of measures to help victims of domestic abuse. So that's great. I feel like that's fairly easy to defend. Um,
Yeah, I think it's all going to come down to that digital tool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I remember, when we started talking about this, you were saying you wanted to take the opposite take to what I'm doing. Here I am, like waffling on it, but
No, I mean it's fair. It is. I'll fully admit it does have all the trappings of something pretty spooky. But I'm fully on board with, sometimes you give up a little bit of freedom for a lot of security, and that's a good thing. Phraseology be damned. I still think I deserve both, and I'll lose neither.
um, I'm on board with that basic concept that it is sometimes worth it to give up freedom to gain security, and that is certainly what they're trying to do here. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't like produce a stronger opinion. I'm still
That's
like
okay.
trying to soak it in, but
I can link just in the chat for anyone who's curious. This is the government's thing that they put out on it. Um,
all right, well, fair enough. Um, I mean, this just seems like the kind of law where if people apply it well, it could be really good, and I just worry that you know what I mean. Like it just seems like it seems like it's written in a way that doesn't ensure that they will apply it well, if I'm understanding it correctly.
I think in my mind, it just comes down to a question of like, what are the risks? The risk of not stopping people in early domestic abuse is like people being murdered. And it seems that there is probably it's like if I have to incorrectly, if I incorrectly predict 9 people from as potential committers of domestic abuse, and I correctly identify one, I think that's a trade I'm willing to make, depending upon what it actually looks like, what they're doing to people that are identified by the system but don't have convictions. That's the one thing I'm not clear on, is what they would even have. Be able to do in that situation.
Yeah, that it just seems like a dangerous setup for an unknown follow-up consequence that where if they don't spell out what it is that they're going to do with that information.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would agree though that preventing one murder is worth having 9 false positives, but
Yeah, it just depends on what they're doing with false positives. Because if they're like, oh, executed, not that they're doing that, that would obviously not be work. So it's a question of what are they actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can just find. I'm trying because I've been just looking a little bit, and I'm trying to see if I can find anything about what this actually would look like. No, I can't.
Do you know if there's any precedent for this? How, like, has any other jurisdiction ever had a law like this before?
I'm not sure. No. Um. I'm trying to see if I can find anything about this most recent. There's not a good name for this bill either, which is making it difficult. Oh, burn in hell, Cosmopolitan. Your fucking website is dog shit. Won't load. Anyways, I'll see if I can find anything in the background here. But yeah, if we want to punt the ball on this one, that's fine.
Yeah. Sorry,
It's all good.
Yeah. I think I do have to punt on this one. I guess I'll come out and be like tentatively in favor of it, but with that one big hesitation about that one thing that seems like it could go very wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, so here's my last one: is that I think causality is not a real thing. I think it's a narrative device and not and not a thing is particularly usefully applicable in science. And this is something that I think the vast majority of people in science disagree with me on. So it's
Yeah. I mean, if you don't believe in causality, like you must be able to have like predictions that you're confident about more than other predictions, and that would have to rely on causality, would it not?
I don't think it has to, and here's why. It's because I think we can use induction to infer. We can observe patterns. We can use induction to derive rules from those patterns, and I think this is what we're already doing in science. Like when people talk about laws of physics, I think there's a misunderstanding that the universe is obeying laws of physics, right? But I don't think the universe is obeying laws. I think the laws are describing the way that the patterns that we observe in the universe. Ivan says, well, there's a pattern there, right? We call that pattern causality. Well, there is a pattern there, but I'm not sure that that's actually what people are calling causality, because when I try to talk to people about causality, they'll often put it in the terms of like, well, if A hadn't happened, then B wouldn't have happened either. And to me, this is a counterfactual, it's a hypothetical, it's a claim about the plausibility of a fictional story. I don't know. Like, I mean, I have only an undergrad degree in physics. I'm no expert on it, but I spent 6 years doing physics problems. I never had to use causality to solve a single one of them. I also, during that time, had an interest in this question and went and talked to a bunch of working physicists during this, and I would try to ask them, what is causality? How does it work? And how do we identify it? And some of them were just like unable to answer the question at all, and others I would give me questions that it, in my estimation, withered under scrutiny.
Okay. I think we need to define what we mean by causality here. Like, do you think that, like, because it feels like even inductions, you would need to be able to make predictions about a certain thing leading to another thing.
Yes.
But you wouldn't consider that to be necessarily causality?
Wait, I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
Would you consider, okay, so if I say, well, I think that, if you drop something in midair, it's going to fall. Would you consider like that to necessarily would you require that statement to require causality?
I think it doesn't.
In order to make it.
I have an expectation that it'll fall because that's an observed pattern of what seems to always happen when we do that. However, we also have lots of observed patterns of things that don't happen 100% of the time, right? If something happens 90% of the time, I can still use induction to predict with 90% probability approximately that it'll happen the next time as well, right? But are we going to call that causality if it's if the second thing only follows the first thing probabilistically most of the time or some of the time, right? Well, I mean, what if the consequence is a thing that only happens 10% of the time, right? Are we still going to call that causality?
I think so. In your mind, here's a question: is there anything that we could ever see that could prove causality? Because it seems like you could always just say, "Well, this happened in relation to this, so we can use that to predict that they will happen in relation again." But we can't ever know if one is actually causing the other.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I think this is like two separate points that you're bringing up. I want to like address them separately. As far as could anything ever prove causality, if somebody could actually formulate it as a falsifiable hypothesis, then perhaps we can get that. And even then, I wouldn't say we could prove it, but I could say we could, like, if we had it as a falsifiable, hypothesis, then we could gather statistical evidence for it. We could at least be like reasonably confident that we believe in it. And by the way, we'd have to use induction to do that because we're doing statistical evidence for it, right? The other thing you said, I'm sorry, can you remind me what was the second thing you?
Yeah, it's could we ever? Is there any way that, or is there any observable phenomenon that could prove causality for you?
Actually, that's the one that I was trying to answer first. But you said a different thing also. It was like,
I thought that was all I said, unless I'm going crazy.
Yeah, there was
which is very
part.
possible.
Okay. Okay. So I've forgotten the exact thing that you said, but I remembered the thing that I was going to say to respond to it. So hopefully this will make sense out of context. Okay, you were saying something like that made me want to say that if you can make the same prediction with or without causality, then causality is superfluous to the analysis you're doing. It doesn't actually add anything to the prediction.
I guess so. I don't know. It feels like you are. I feel like you're. I feel like this train of thought is going to lead you to a realm where you reinvent causality in all but name. Where you'll say, well, this thing, we know that this thing is going to happen because we know that B is going to happen because we observed A, but we don't know that A is causing B.
It's more like I don't even know what it means to say that A is causing B.
Well, do you not think that, like, when gravity causes an object to fall, does that not function?
No, that isn't. I think gravity is the falling.
Oh, okay.
It's just the thing that happens. I don't think it's causing anything to happen.
This almost feels like more of a language thing then, because so would you say, would you not if I scream at someone and they feel bad, you wouldn't say that. Would you say similarly that the scream is the thing, is them feeling bad?
No. So this is why I say that I view it as a narrative device, because colloquially I would say that you screamed at somebody and caused them to feel bad. I think just like on a conversational level, it makes perfect sense and it might be a good way to explain things. But when you were saying something like, oh, this is just all about language, in a certain sense, I do agree, because since I see it as a narrative device, I think it is something that consists only of language. I don't think it is language that's actually describing any underlying reality that that relies on that concept.
And you would say, and you would say that it is language that is not describing any underlying reality, as distinct from like the fact that Descartes' a demon and stuff like that. Like the word rock does describe some underlying reality in a way that the gravity caused the rock to fall doesn't.
Right. So now, gravity caused the rock
I
to
don't
fall
get that at all.
Is a perfectly legitimate colloquial thing to say, right? Like it makes sense in a conversation that I could say something like that, right? But I mean, I do believe the rock is real. I believe objective reality is a real thing. I believe that rocks fall when we drop them. Um, but it's like I could say that without ever invoking causality, and then if I just bring causality into it and I say gravity caused the rock to fall, as opposed to just the rock fell and that's what gravity is, like what information am I adding by bringing causality into the description?
Well, when you say the rock falling is gravity, I feel like that I feel like that statement is pretty interchangeable with gravity is causing the rock to fall. When you say the rock falling is gravity, I feel like that is the same as saying, well, the force of gravity when affecting this object, the result is for it to fall. Because you still must, because on a physics level, you still must acknowledge the like physical reality of that pull. It seems like, cause it seems like you are saying all the things of causality, but but instead of saying A causes B, you're almost saying you're saying that we should conceptualize it instead as A B, not as
Well,
A arrow B. But that feels like
it
still that feels like the same thing in different words.
well, it's a sequence of events, right? And it does feel like to me like an unnecessary extra step. But I want to go back and explain it in terms of something that I said a few minutes earlier, which is that I think what laws of physics are doing, I don't think they're dictating what's happening. I think they're describing what's happening. And I think gravity is a description of what's happening. I don't think it's a cause of anything happening. I think it's, like all if we want to take, Newtonian gravity or general relativity or whatever, I think these are just mathematical descriptions of when and where and how things fall. I don't think
I
they're
agree that they are that the laws from a language perspective are descriptive, but I think the purpose of them is to be prescriptive, not in the sense of but or rather not prescriptive, but predictive of what will be, predictive of prescriptive things. So like, it's not as if, all of us agreed that gravity isn't real, we would start floating. But the reason why we believe in the idea of gravity is because we believe that is what will happen, but it is our best attempt at that. I don't know. It feels like almost like a language. Have you seen, have you seen, what's the movie? Arrival? Have you ever seen Arrival?
Oh, is that where the aliens are drawing circles, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I don't remember it super well, but I do remember it a little bit.
Yeah. This just feels the way my current sense is that it feels like we're approaching this fundamentally differently from like a language perspective. Like the way that you're conceiving in it is in a way that like I can't like quite grasp. But like my sense is like it feels like we're getting to the same places. Like here, I need to think of a good question here. What would you say? So would you say that like it's difficult to describe causality without just saying would this cause that. Um, there are reasons why things happen. Would you agree there?
Colloquially, I would say that.
No. We're ditching all the colloquially. All colloquialness is out the window.
No, I think in terms of physics, that's a completely meaningless statement. It has no predictive validity.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Okay. Would you say that the presence of a gravitational pull results in an object being pulled?
No, because I don't think those two things are separable. I don't think the gravitational pull and the thing being pulled is two separate things. I think that's only one thing.
It has to be separable on some level because we can conceptualize the thing in the presence of gravity and not in the presence of gravity. Or would you just say
Right,
that at that point you're describing two fundamentally different things?
Yeah, I think so because when you're putting the thing in a place where it's not in the presence of gravity, it isn't falling, right?
Yes.
Right. So like, what's the difference between saying it's falling versus something caused it to fall?
I don't think I think that the difference is to identify whatever factors are relevant to a thing falling. And it seems that the factor that would be relevant would not be the object itself, but the presence of gravity.
But I think gravity is just literally a description of the behavior it's doing when it falls. I don't think it's a separate thing making it fall.
But you would, but surely we would describe it as a separate thing because it could affect other things in a way that isn't affecting the object. Like, for example, if there was a second object, well, now they would both be falling, and we could see that having one object on its own, having two objects on their own, versus having that one object with gravity or those two objects with gravity, it feels like you can create like a. It feels like it makes a it makes sense for us to then identify the thing that's changing and introducing the behavior of falling to be worthy of like categorization.
Yeah. So in terms of a predictive model, I will agree that it's worthy of categorization. It's a successful predictive model that things fall towards other things that are dense in terms of like matter and energy, right? But I don't know that causality needs to come into that. I think only induction and pattern seeking is sufficient to make that prediction. And also let me point out that when you were phrasing all that, you were putting it in terms of counterfactuals, right? Which the way that I interpret a counterfactual when I hear it is this is a fictional story and it's a claim about the plausibility of a fictional story. Now, the fictional story you were telling is I do see it as a very plausible one. It's like two things are above the earth, you drop them and they fall. This is a thing that it's commonly happens in real life, right? I don't see anything particularly plausible about or implausible about it. But I would just say, like, the reason I see it as plausible is just because of the commonness with which that thing happens, and I make an inductive argument that I expect it to continue to happen, due to just recognizing that pattern.
But I feel like this inductive, if you're only going to be going off of those inductive arguments and trying to never invoke causality, I feel like you would start to, I feel like there are conclusions, I don't know, I'm struggling to think of one off the top of my head, but I feel like there are conclusions that we probably do believe in that we need some sort of belief about causality to arrive to, and we can't arrive to purely from just induction. Like correlation versus causation, right? Like that's a distinction that requires some ability to recognize just when two things are highly adjacent versus an actual relationship between them.
Well, correlation is a relationship between them still, right? It's just causation is the claim that there's a different type of relationship than merely a correlation, right? But when we do science, when we do observations, correlation is the thing we observe, right? We don't observe causation ever. We only like infer it from observed correlations, right?
Yes, I think in a roundabout way, because oh man, I'm about to say I think about physics, and you know a lot more about physics. But like, aren't there conclusions of physics that we've come to that we've never even begun to observe that are like built up upon like we have never, I don't think, like there are certain things about the universe that we've never observed, but we have figured out like must exist in some way because of a certain. Gosh, I don't have the wording to describe this, but like,
are you thinking of like dark matter or something like that?
Yeah, I think I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that those might be the causality might be based on induction on a fundamental level, but we build up to that. It's not as if right we could make those predictions based off predictions, which then in turn might be based on induction.
Right. So we need induction in order to make those predictions, right? We need induction in order to like even infer causality in the first place, and then you could use causality to make the prediction. But this just seems like an unnecessary extra step when you can just use induction to go straight to the prediction.
I don't know. The word induction is doing a lot of work here, and I don't know if I agree that all of these things would necessarily be induction.
Okay, I can explain what I think induction is, if this helps. Like, I think it's the...
Yeah, that actually would help, I think.
Okay, I think it's the application of probabilistic reasoning to observed patterns.
Probabilistic reasoning to observe patterns.
Yeah.
Would you say that math is based on inductions?
Yes, I would.
What? No way!
I do believe that.
What? Hey, no way. Because would you just say that like the logical understanding of one and one being two isn't of itself an observation of a kind?
No, I don't think you can ever observe 1 plus 1 equaling 2. And I think if you want to demonstrate to yourself that 1 plus 1 equals 2, you do it by analogy to other things that you actually do observe. Right? I have one of this thing. I have one of this thing. I put them together. There's two. You're not
But what,
actually.
okay, but wouldn't that mean though, if you can only ever prove math as an analogy to real things, wouldn't that mean that like oh god, what's the value that's used in electricity for like the inverted it's like a number that shouldn't be able to exist, so we assign it like a letter. I think it's like I or
I.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't that not function then because we can only understand it as analogizing it and we can't analogize it?
No. It's like okay. So it's true that you don't observe an I number of anything, but where you get I from is from applying logic to other forms of math that are grounded in observable things.
Hold on, can you say that again, please?
Yeah, I think where we get I from is we're taking mathematical rules and mathematical logic and we're applying them to other math that we already know, right? Like we have reason to believe in like negative numbers, right? Not that you're gonna have -1 apples in your hand, but you could like.
But you can. Okay, so the way you can't analogize I, but you can analogize the components necessary to get to I.
Yeah, exactly. So like
Okay.
like -1 could be a temperature or an elevation, right? So, and the only other thing you need is square roots, and I think we have like good inductive justification for believing that square roots are a useful real thing that you can do, right?
Okay, but I understand you can still analogize the components of how, or not even the components, but the basis by which you come to that conclusion. But I
Mm-hmm.
still feel like at that point that if you're dealing with I, then you're still dealing with something that isn't an induction because it's not observable. Especially then if you try to apply I, you might be able to observe the way you get to I. But then if you were to apply I, you can't analogize that because I is something that's not analogizable.
Um, Indirectly, it is. Like there are scientific theories that use I to make predictive models. Like this comes up in quantum mechanics. It also comes up in like electrical circuit descriptions.
hmm So yeah, it feels like those can't be functioning off of induction if induction is based off of your observations.
But I mean, that isn't that exactly what induction is? Like if when I'm saying that it's the application of probabilistic reasoning to observed patterns, it's just like here's a thing that appears to happen repeatedly. Now I make a description of it, of the thing that happens repeatedly, and I think math is just like a very basic abstract symbolic description of a lot of patterns that we observe.
Oh god damn it! I think you're right. Fuck me, man. God damn it! I'm just because know what it is. I'm sure you've had this many times. Like, did we discover math or did we invent it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's just that. It's just that. Probably.
Kind of.
Like, it's probably a. Although I don't know. Is it? Because the problem is that is that math is like a specific thing. It's less of a. It really is less of like a concept, and it is like a thing, like the idea of one. But the thing is, like, causality, that feels much more to me as less a thing and more a concept of consciousness in the same way as like the law of identity. It's like I feel like it feels so innate to my understanding of reality that that A theoretically could cause B as the idea of A is A. So for me to even conceptualize it differently requires like it's like okay, maybe we are Descartes' demon and not just we're Descartes' demon. We're not just in the matrix, but we're in a matrix that is like a totally foreign simulated reality from what the actual reality is. But I don't know.
I think what it is like it. I think it is like a very common human way of thinking. It might even be biologically innate to humans to think in terms of causality. I'm not sure if it's biological or not. Maybe, but
Dude,
it
we're so
seems to be
fucked when we
like
meet aliens, by the way. I'm
what's that?
calling it. We are so fucked when we meet aliens. That's my call. My call is that we're going to be fundamentally incapable of interfacing with aliens.
Yeah,
Right? No, no,
maybe. I
no.
mean,
Captain Kirk tapping out the prime numbers is not going to save us.
well, he just needs to tap out I number of things, right?
Yeah, true.
Um, But yeah, I think we actually could compare causality to something like law of identity, right? Because like law of identity feels really fundamental because we use it to justify so many of our other beliefs. It appears, as far as we can tell, to be consistent with everything we observe, but that's an inductive argument for the law of identity.
I don't know. Oh, this is might be. I feel like we're rapidly approaching presuppositionalist arguments, where it's
I
like I feel like where it's just like I feel like I have the experience of causality and I have no way to like actually prove it.
um I've never in my life found anyone who was able to prove it, and neither have I ever found in my life anyone who could point to me to a situation in which causality is a necessary component to understand that situation or to form a predictive model in it. That situation might exist. Maybe I'm just an ignorant dumbass, but I've
I
been
guess
asking this question for 20 years and I've never found it.
I don't know. I feel like it's the case that you could use induction to get to all conclusions that you get with predictive models, but it's another thing to say that you would. Like if we abandon, I don't know, but the thing is, see, what I want to say is, but cricket, if you try to get to everything with induction, you're going to get to wrong things. But the thing is, whereas if I use predictive models, but like what does it I struggle to even be able to unconceptualize or describe what the different thought processes would be of predictive versus inductive.
Yeah, no, but I'm not actually distinguishing those two things from each other. Because, but I think predictive models are fine, and I'm not objecting to those. I think predictive models are a form of induction. I think they are not a demonstration of causality.
Oh,
I think predictive models, like all they really
I don't know.
are, is when we observe patterns in the world that we live in, and then we just try to apply those patterns where we think they fit. That I think that's literally what a predictive model is.
I don't know. I don't fucking know, dude. This is crazy. Okay, no, I do know. I can figure this out. Okay, if you can be predictive
Mm-hmm.
without endorsing causality. No, you can't. Oh no, you can. Wait, I don't know, because it's like, because it's like, there's so many levels to causality. It's like,
I can
okay,
definitely be predictive.
this isn't what you mean, but like, isn't aren't you? Aren't these arguments causing you to believe that causality isn't real?
Colloquially, I'd say that, but I don't think in
Not,
phys. I
not
don't think
colloquially, not colloquially.
I
In
know.
physics, in a
I don't
math
think
proof.
I can justify in physics that that's necessarily the case. I think I can observe, patterns where my cognition matches the argument that I'm given, right? Where there's like a certain pattern, there's like a certain logical structure to the argument that I'm given, and and then there's that same logical structure, uh, follows in my cognition. But I'm not sure what does it add to the, if I say like this thing happens, then this thing happens. What do I add? What information am I adding by saying that the first thing causes the second thing?
It feels like it would be very difficult to string out what would normally be. So if we go on from the rock analogy and introduce like further and further chains, right? Gravity causes the rock to fall, which causes the tree to break, which kills the bird. Would you still just say that in the same way rock and gravity are just a thing? Those are all the thing?
Well, not all of those things are gravity. I would just say like this is just like a sequence of events, and if events, the way we talk about it is as if events are like separable, discrete things, but it's really not. I think it's just like this is a process that's happening that has components that are
You can't
familiar
invoke
to.
process. You can't invoke the word process if you don't
Can't
believe in
I?
causality.
Why not?
No, because a process in and of itself is a cause. A process is definition. A process definitionally requires a thing to result in another thing, which is causality.
If I say a rooster crows and then the sun rises, I would describe that as a process. That's the process of what happened on my farm. It doesn't mean the rooster caused the sun to rise.
You might be wrong. You might use causality to be wrong, but you couldn't say. You wouldn't necessarily observe the rooster and the sun causing the rooster crowed and then the sun to rise. You wouldn't understand it as a process unless there was some relation there, right? Because
otherwise, some relation there.
No, not just any relation, but a relation of causation. Because that's just the point. You wouldn't say, the process of me being born and Space Jam being released. You wouldn't say that. That wouldn't be a correct use of the word process. Process has to mean that there's some sort of causal relationship there.
Okay, what I meant when I said pieces. Process was just like sequence of events. If you want to object to my use of the word process and ask me to describe it,
I feel like that's so. I feel like that's the point I'm trying to get across. It feels like it's not possible to conceptualize things without having some way to describe the relationship of an event potentially causing a second event.
Okay, I do have a conception for the relationship between these things, which is that there are predictable patterns in nature that we observe, and that we extrapolate from those patterns. And that's what our
why are they predictable? Because not all patterns are good for predicting.
Yeah, correct. Not all of them are.
Okay, but how do you distinguish? How do you distinguish without invoking causality?
The way you distinguish is by how much statistical evidence you have for the pattern.
I don't know enough about stats, but I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know, because isn't statistical evidence, if you're saying, okay, what kind of statistical evidence? Because I feel like what I wanted to say, but I want to give you a chance here, is like, okay, but that statistical evidence is going to be evidence of causality.
How is it?
Okay, so like, every single day, I wake up and every single day the sun rises. I've got a million statistical examples of this. But we wouldn't say that, but we both know it's wrong that me waking up causes the sun to rise. And I feel like how I would get out of that conclusion is by saying, but this statistical evidence doesn't reveal a causal relationship. But how do you get out of that?
How I would get out of it is that there's no need for a causal relationship. It's a sequence of events that repeated a whole bunch of times, and therefore I can look at every time you wake up, and if I knew nothing else about the situation, if I had no other information on which to make my prediction, I could just say if I had a pattern of evidence that it's like you woke up 1,000 times and 950 of those, the sun rose within 15 minutes afterwards, then I feel like I can estimate with approximately 95% confidence that anytime you wake up, the sun's going to rise within 15 minutes.
But that's wrong. That isn't true.
You could make a literal description of what happened, isn't it?
You could no. But you're not saying it's a literal description. You're saying going forward. And the other thing is, I feel like this starts to get destroyed by testing. Because then, if you said, "Oh well, when Sam wakes up," my name's Sam, by the way. I just doxed myself, but whatever. That's fine. It's a common name. When Sam wakes up, the sun is going to rise. We're making that prediction. Well, then you say, "Oh, dude, we need the sun to rise early, so can we get the sun to rise early today? Quick, wake up, Sam!" And it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. So as soon as you start to test things, you're just gonna say that's further statistical evidence, isn't it?
You're adding more information on by which we can add to the prediction, right? At that point, we're using a predictive model that applies only to part of the information that we're given, and then if you add more information.
That's not fair, because you have to draw the line for information somewhere. Like, you can't replicate every single condition ever. You have to draw the line for what variables you're going to choose and what aren't. Because otherwise, you could also just say, well, nothing. This is the 332nd time it happened, so it's only applicable to 332nd time. The 333rd time, that's not the 332nd time. Like, right? Am I making sense?
Yeah, but I have an inductive argument for why that's true. That's like if something happens 332 times, it seems unlikely that the pattern doesn't often break on that exact number, right?
But it could because you could.
With low
I wake up
probability, right?
332 times. I wake up and the sun rises shortly thereafter. But the 333rd time it happens, we attempt to do it. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Does that not?
So,
Okay.
okay, but the problem with this is that you have to leave room for uncertainty in any predictive model, right? It's like you can't just go like, well, I woke up right before the sun rose 4 times in a row. Well, that's 100% of the time that the sun rose. Right after
you would still have to have some uncertainty. But the thing that I'm trying to get at is I feel like without causality, you can come to bad predictions. That's the thing that I'm trying to say here, is I feel like if you aren't engaged in a question of what actually causes what, you can find associations with statistical evidence that would lead you to incorrect conclusions. Like it's like that one website, where it's like Will Ferrell movies and the production of cheese in Wisconsin or something like this. It's all these statistical coincidences. I feel like your system doesn't have a good way to distinguish from coincidences or alternate causes when it comes to making predictions.
I don't think causality helps you to do that either, because you don't actually have a system by which to identify it.
So would you say that when I am doing a test to try and prove causality, that is just evidence, more statistical evidence by which you can come to inductions?
Yeah, I think any information I have about the scenario that I'm predicting is more statistical evidence by which I can make inductive arguments.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so the thing I'm just trying to wonder is, you're saying the way that you get out of this with predictive stuff would be experiments we would run off of induction, and we would come to similar conclusions?
No, I think that's what we already do, and then we just describe it in terms of causality, but I don't think that description actually adds anything to the process. I think the predictive model is just as good without inserting causality into it.
Yeah, I don't know, because then I feel like the problem now is, if that is true, and I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is one way or the other. I need to think about it. I feel like there's an internal experience of the understanding of causality that's very difficult for me to contend with, like the opposite.
Can I ask if you believe in free will?
No, I don't believe in free will.
Do you believe there's an internal experience of free will?
Some degree, yeah.
Okay, so then we agree that you can have internal experiences of things that aren't real, yeah?
Yes, but I would need some. The problem is you're presenting me a world where, like, the law of identity isn't real. I can conceptualize the logical consequences of free will. Like, my brain can still work within that framework. Without causality, I don't know if I can think of things without causality.
Okay.
And that's the trip up, where it's like, I don't know, like you're asking me to divide by 0, and I'm not going to 2001 calculator.
Okay, so if I talk about, like, the difference between epistemology versus ontology, do you get what I mean by that distinction?
Yes, mostly.
Okay. So I want to distinguish how each of these things applies to, like, the law of identity, for example. Now, like, all these claims I'm making about where we get the law of identity, these are all epistemological claims. There may very well be some fundamental ontological law of identity that dictates how the universe behaves. But even if there is, the only way that we know about it and the way that we use it is by observing patterns that appear consistent with it and making an inductive argument that there may be such a thing. So epistemologically, it's a description that's consistent with what we observe. It might also be an ontological feature of the universe, but I don't think we can ever know that for sure. We can only know that it's consistent with our predictive models, and the predictive validity of a model is different from its descriptive validity, right?
I might use these words incorrectly. I think that the causalities that we believe in are epistemological, but the concept of causality is ontological. And I don't know, Because you might say, oh, well, your specific causalities might be wrong. Yes. I can conceive of me being wrong. What I can't conceive of is the idea that causality as a concept doesn't exist.
Okay, what is it then? If it's an
It,
ontological property of the universe, what is that property?
a thing can cause a thing.
That's a recursive definition, though, isn't it?
Is it?
When you use the word cause while trying to explain what causality is?
Yes. Oh, no. It is recursive, but so is the law of identity.
No, I don't agree with that.
What? It's A equals A. That has to be recursive. No way.
But recursive doesn't just mean that it has a thing repeated within it, right? Like obviously the law of identity is recursive in that sense. When I say a recursive definition, what I mean is that if I'm trying to define what something is and I use that same word in its own definition.
But you are doing that. What is
law
A?
Of identity?
Well, yeah. What is this particular thing? Well, it is that particular thing.
No, this isn't what I mean, right?
No, that is what you mean. Because
no.
If I say what is a cow, right? I can start to use other words, but eventually I'm just going to have to say it's like what is red? Well, red is this thing. There are no qualities you can describe about it. So I am using red to define red. Am I not?
No, I don't think so. You don't have to, anyways. I mean, you can give a description of red in which you use the word red again.
What is the way to describe red without using red?
Okay. The qualia of seeing red, I don't think is a thing that we can really explain to anybody, right? But we can explain red in terms of physics, right? We could say like, well, it's approximately these wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation. And we call objects red when they predominantly reflect or emit those same wavelengths.
But the point of the law of identity is that if you keep going down that rabbit hole, eventually you have to say this thing is this thing.
Well, but what's the argument for why we have to do that?
Because it is in order for us to even have this conversation, we have to agree that when you say red, you mean red. But why? Why is a thing itself, even when you refer to it? Like, I think that's like that is also a given that we have to assume in the same way to have conversations that I feel like I'm having to. I personally feel like I need to assume causality.
Okay, why do we have to?
In order to be able to converse or think or understand.
Okay, how do you know that we can't converse and think and understand without a law of identity?
Because I can't conceive of it. All the evidence points to that, both in terms of my internal experience and what I am able to divine about other people's internal experiences.
Okay, and when you say all the evidence, I think what's going on under the hood is induction.
It might be, but even to have induction, you have because I feel like it's an Ouroboros. It's like, sure, you can't have I'm having to use induction, but I feel like to even use induction, you're having to use the law of identity. And what I'm trying to say is, imagine a three-parted Ouroboros, and one of those parts is causality. I don't know how to ontologically engage without the idea of one thing causing another thing.
Okay, so here's kind of what it sounds like to me is like the reason we need the law of identity is it's not that it's some basic fact that we just have knowledge of out of nowhere. It's that we have this proposition that we use because it helps us do these other processes, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like, it sounded to me like that was the argument you're making, right? Like because we want to facilitate conversations, because we want to facilitate the predictive models or whatever else we use to understand things, like the law of identity facilitates that, right?
Sort of. Well, I think what I'm trying to say is something more fundamental. It isn't facilitating. It feels like it's required for my conscious experience to have thoughts. Like, I cannot conceive of red not being red. Because when I say red, I mean red, right? Red is red. But, and so like, imagine a world where a thing was not itself. It doesn't even function, right?
I don't even know how to imagine that, but that's not a proof that must be the case, right?
it is not, but it is something we just have to but it is something that we're stuck with contending,
I
right?
agree, we're stuck with it.
Because at that point I think you are appealing to what if we all live in the Matrix? It's like
Yeah,
maybe
but like let me
ultimately that
point
doesn't.
out, like I do believe in the law of identity. I do believe it's a real thing, and I do believe it's useful, and I believe it has the exact applications that you said that it has. So I'm not trying to argue that
Yes,
this is something.
the thing
We
that
should
I'm trying
do
to say
away.
is all of those are just as true for causality for me at least, which is why I think I'm having difficulty. Is like when you're asking me to imagine how do you come to predictions without causality? I can't do it any more than I can abandon the law of identity. That's just like that's how I feel right now.
Okay, I think you can actually make predictions without causality, and here's why I could say this. I think you can observe patterns in nature and then predict something else that's happening that's not actually caused by the pattern you observe.
I think you can make predictions without identifying a specific causal relationship. You could say,
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to happen. I don't know why. But what I'm saying is that the concept of causality, the idea that things don't cause things, that's something I can't. That is a way of thinking that I can't do.
So when you like, I don't. It's not exactly that I say things don't cause things. It's more that it doesn't even mean anything to me to say that they do or they don't. I don't. I think it adds zero information in either case. And like, okay, um, like to do like a predictive model in which I don't have to like use thing A causing thing B. Like I could say, I've observed like X amount of this species of bird. Like maybe I've seen 500 of them and they're all white. And then I predict that the next one I see is also going to be white. And I could be wrong, but it's pretty likely that, like if I've seen 500 consecutive ones that are white, I think I have like pretty good reason to believe that the next one's going to be white as well. But that doesn't mean that the ones I saw before are causing that one to be white.
Yeah, I agree on all these specific ones. My problem is like there are certain things where I can't envision understanding them without causality, like gravity. Like I can't envision a way of understanding gravity that doesn't intimately involve causality.
I think the predictive model is the way to understand it. I think it's just like the math is just a description of what happens.
I don't agree. I feel like when I understand the mechanism by which that's the thing. I can't even use the word mechanism because a mechanism is a mechanism of causality. Like I can't think of processes and interactions in a way that doesn't involve one thing causing another.
I'm just not even sure what it means to say that one thing causes another, as opposed to like these are two things that happen in sequence at X probability.
Well, because we can imagine, a rock. We can imagine a rock and gravity.
Mm-hmm.
Those a rock and then a rock falls as being caused by gravity, and a rock sitting on the ground, and then it exploding,
Mm-hmm.
and gravity didn't cause that. Like the rock was there, we introduced gravity, the rock exploded. Now, in that scenario, it's because we shot a laser at it. In situation two, we have the rock, we introduced gravity, it caused it to fall. I can understand the difference in those relationships. One just happened to happen, whereas one was intimately involved in the delta, in the change.
So you're saying in the second case is like where you shoot a laser at a rock, then it explodes. That's the one where the causality is required. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that when you said I don't understand what it means for like causality versus coincidence. Like I feel like I can envision a scenario where we have two scenarios where we have a rock and we introduce gravity. And in one scenario, the rock falls, and in the other scenario, the rock is destroyed. And in scenario one, when we introduce gravity, we also fired a laser at it. Causality allows me to distinguish the relationship of the rock and gravity in relation to the rock being destroyed versus rock and gravity and the rock falling.
I mean, doesn't induction do that same thing?
It's not that induction couldn't do that, but my brain cannot think of it, cannot think of causality in that second scenario where gravity is introduced. Like when you tell me gravity, when you describe to me the phenomenon of gravity and how objects fall, that's causality to me. Like I can't like not think that.
If you want to just say like there are predictable sequences of events and we're going to call that causality, just the recurrence of those events is causality, then because I think that's not quite what you're saying, right? Because you
Yeah, it's like the thing. I'm having difficulty describing it because it's such like an internal. It feels like an internal experience. But like in my head, I think, oh, the gravity was a force, and it took an effect upon the rock, and the effect was to cause it to fall. Like I
yeah.
don't know
So
how. The
let
thing
me point
I don't know
out
how. I don't know how to define the word cause without explaining cause without just saying causality. That's the
like
problem.
forces are a thing from Newtonian physics, by the way, and they're not used in general relativity. Gravity is not considered a force relativistically.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I messed it up there, but as you may or may not have realized, I don't have a classical education in physics.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, most people don't. I don't
Yeah.
know
Sorry,
that you
I
need
didn't mean to
to.
say you were shit talking or anything. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm not shit talking you. I don't think I have ever shit talked you, but
W. Let's go.
um, but yeah, to like when you say like it's a force and it caused this thing to happen, it's like I think you're just describing it in terms of the Newtonian predictive model, which described gravity as a force. But general relativity makes the same prediction without describing it as a force. So of what use is it to describe it as a force to get a less accurate predictive model? I mean, is the only thing would be that the equations are simpler, right?
Yeah, I
It's
think
easier to
my
use.
contention at this point, setting aside whether or not we can get all the same predictions without causality, which I'm still not sure about, the thing that I'm trying to explain right now is it's not a question of why should we, it's like I can't. You're asking me to believe that to disbelieve in the law of identity, and I just can't. My mind does conceptualize it in that way. When I have the
Sort of.
qualia of learning about gravity, I causality. I believe in causality.
Yeah. So it's not so much that I'm like literally asking you to disbelieve the law of identity. I'm asking you to examine how and why you believe it.
Yeah, I and I feel like similarly, if you asked me why the law of identity is, I feel like all I could do is gesture and just be like, it is. Like, because like
so
why
so
is when you say a, why is that a? Well, it is.
okay. So this
It's
sounds
a.
like you're just describing like intuition, effectively, right?
Maybe, yeah, it might be intuition actually. I don't I feel like I don't have good language to like separate out in my mind like an intuition built on things versus like a very like a logical intuition that like a like but yeah, in the way that A equals B equals C means A equals C, in that sense of an intuition, yes.
I'm completely fine with saying that causality is an intuitive way to think of things. I have no objection to
Okay.
this. I think it
Okay.
is the way that most people think of things. I think it's pretty much adequate to get you through your your day. Like it gets you to understanding as much physics as most people will ever need to know. It's basically like an academic dispute that I'm making, which is that this is a colloquialism. It's a narrative device which can communicate something effectively, but which is actually unnecessary to the math that constitutes the most basic abstract description of the things it's trying to describe.
Yeah. Um I think I actually mostly agree at that stage. I don't know. The problem is like I think there's some I feel like there's a strong assertion to be made that like we ought act as if our intuitions are correct in the same way
Yeah,
we ought act as if this reality is the real one.
and
And then the only other
yeah,
or sorry, go ahead.
for the most part, I agree with that. Right now, I think you can apply skepticism to your intuitions. Like you shouldn't treat them as if they are like 100% probability correct. But I think it's generally a good idea to accept them in the absence of a reason to do otherwise. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Then I think we're mostly in agreement.
Okay. Um. This worked out surprisingly well in terms of like the amount of time versus like the
Yeah.
number of like hot take things we did. I mean, hopefully I'm not keeping you too long for 3 hours, but
No, yeah, that's all good.
Okay, you know what? I am gonna raid into you. I got 5 people here, and I'm gonna
Let's go.
anybody who hasn't already followed you should. So I'm gonna send them your way, and thank you very much for joining me. It was fun, and
Yeah.
see you next time you're available. Hopefully next week.
Yeah, next week should be good. Looking forward to it.
All right.